tyre change. Meanwhile, in Buckinghamshire, expect delays on the A4-04 northbound, where 10-minute hold-ups are noted due to congestion near the junction with the M40. Please exercise caution and plan alternative routes if possible. For more travel news, go to gbnews.com.
Crash Law 24 sponsors GB News Traffic and Travel Report.
Good afternoon, Britain. Weekdays from midday.
Gynecological health, women's health as a whole, is one of the biggest societal challenges that we face currently.
What would you say, Josephine?
I've been massively failed over the 12 years that I've been dealing with endometriosis in many, many different ways. I wasn't believed to begin with. I was passed from pillar to post. There was a time where after an endometriosis surgery, I got sepsis. I wasn't believed and I was sent away from the hospital and the next day was taken back in quite a serious state. I think because I was young, but also because endometriosis just isn't taken seriously at all.
Is it because women go to the doctor and they say, I'm having really bad pains, and then what does the doctor say sometimes? Do they say, oh, well, everyone gets bad period pains, just have a bit of Nurofen? Is that what sometimes happens, Valentina?
Period and pelvic pain is a silent public health pandemic. It affects 9 out of 10 women. And research from the British Medical Journal tells us that we lose 9 to 12 productive days each year to period pain. But we can't really blame medical professionals. We can't blame GPs. We can't blame the NHS because there isn't research that they can rely on. We have massively underfunded gynecological health as a whole. Currently, we spend only about 2.4% of our entire public health budget for the entirety of women's health. So that 2.4% is measly, and it has to stretch to cover breast cancer, maternity care, menopause, endometriosis. And because women were not allowed to take part in clinical trials up until 1993, we don't really know how most modern medications affect the female physiology versus the male physiology.
The People's Channel.
Good morning, 9:30 on Wednesday, the 16th of April. Live across the UK, Britain's Newsroom with Andrew Pearce and Bev Turner.
Are we looking at a summer of discontent? Rubbish is piling up in Birmingham. Next, it could be the NHS workers, university staff, teachers and civil servants, all talking about striking over pay and conditions this summer.
When is a woman not a woman? An adult female human being, sex assigned at birth, people who menstruate any moment now. The Supreme Court will deliver its verdict on how a woman should be defined in law, and it will have huge implications.
D-Day veteran betrayal. War heroes are calling out the government for backtracking on their travel pledge for those to attend commemorations in Normandy.
And the border crisis goes on. Forget the gangs. The only thing being smashed by the government at the moment are small boat crossing record. How many do you think yesterday? 700 in a single day.
Block the banter ban. Peers will fight Angela Rayner's pub banter crackdown, calling it a threat to free speech. It's nice to see the Lord's doing something good for once. We're going to be talking to Lord Toby Young.
Tommy Robinson will find out this morning if an appeal against his 18-month prison sentence for contempt of court has been successful. We'll have the latest.
And a bit of breaking news also. Inflation has eased to 2.6% in March, falling from 2.8%.
Can you tell her to wear deodorant? To wear deodorant? She's smelling really bad.
A stinky scandal at tennis. British number 4 tennis player Harriet Dart wanted the umpire to take action against her opponent, asking her to wear deodorant. She then went on and lost in straight sets. What a ridiculous sportswoman. I mean, don't people get sweaty in sport? Isn't
Yes.
that the whole point?
It was a bit mean, wasn't it? What was the point of that? She was obviously losing.
She's losing and losing badly, and she's now become, I'm afraid she's ridiculed.
Went on the attack. Not acceptable. What do you do, though, if someone at work does have BO? Do you tell them or not?
We had a colleague in my first newspaper, but none of us had the courage to tell him.
Oh.
So we put a tin of deodorant in his drawer, and he found it in the drawer and said, what am I supposed to do with this? So I had the courage to say, perhaps you could try it.
Oh, dear. Oh, well, at least I know you'll be honest with me then if I ever turn up a bit stinky at work one day. Good to know. gbnews.com/your say. First, the latest headlines. Here's Sam Francis. Ah.
Bev, Andrew, thank you, and good morning to you just after 9:30. Well, the top story this hour, UK inflation has dropped to 2.6%. That is lower than expected, driven mainly by falling petrol prices. It's the second month now in a row that price rises have slowed, but the relief may be short-lived, with analysts warning inflation could spike again from July. The Bank of England expects it to hit 3.7% this year, and it's now forecast to stay at least above the 2% target until the end of 2027. Well, the Chancellor is calling it a sign that her plan is working, but admits that families are still feeling the squeeze. Rachel Reeves says falling inflation, rising wages and modest growth show progress, but warns there is still more to be done. She highlights a rise in the minimum wage, frozen fuel duty and free breakfast clubs in schools as key support for parents and families. But with inflation expected to climb again, pressure is mounting on the government to keep prices under control. The UK Supreme Court is set to rule this morning on how the word woman should be defined in law. The landmark decision follows a long-running legal battle between the Scottish Government and campaign group For Women Scotland. At the heart of the case is whether transgender women with a gender recognition certificate are entitled the sex-based rights. Well, the outcome could reshape how single-sex spaces, maternity policies and sports events are managed across Britain. It comes amid growing debate over how the Equality Act protects both biological sex and gender reassignment. Manchester arena bomb plotter Hasham Abedi has been moved to Britain's most secure prison cell after a violent attack on guards at HMP Frankland. 3 officers were doused in cooking oil and stabbed with a homemade weapon in the high-security jail's separation unit. Abedi's now back in Belmarsh, held in the UK's only available suite cell, a fortified unit watched round the clock by 5 staff and a prison dog. He's serving at least 55 years for helping his brother kill 22 people at an Ariana Grande concert in 2017. The government's ordered a review now as prison unions are demanding stab vests, tasers and a ban on self-cooking in prisons. Serious pollution incidents by England's water companies have hit a 10-year high, with campaigners warning the system is failing. New data reveals nearly 2,500 spills last year, more than double the target, risking harm to wildlife and public health. Campaign groups Surfers Against Sewage say rivers and coastlines are being blighted by repeated failures. But water firms say they do plan to invest £12 billion to cut spills. Most of that, though, will come from rising bills. And your Easter getaway just got smoother. Over 1,000 miles of roadworks are being lifted across England from Thursday morning. National Highways says 97.5% of major routes will be cone-free to help millions hit the road with fewer delays. Over 19 million drivers are expected on Good Friday alone, with busy travel continuing right through to Easter Monday. But the RAC is warning of a hat-trick of hold-ups as families rush to make the most of the long weekend, and drivers are being urged to plan ahead, check their tyres and fuel up before setting off. Those are the latest headlines. A full roundup of all the top stories at 10 o'clock, and do stay with us for that Supreme Court ruling later this hour.
Very good morning, Britain's Newsroom with Andrew and Bev, and what a morning we have for you. We talk a lot on this show, don't we, about what is a woman, what is a man. I mean, that was really weaponised in the general election campaign, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Everybody was held to account on that. And we've got Supreme Court ruling this morning, which might help us decide that.
And this flows from, in Scotland, if you remember, they changed the law, the first part of the United Kingdom, where if you had a gender document saying you're a woman...
Gender recognition
certificate, you could be a woman.
Officially, and therefore it would give you rights to female-only spaces or equal pay, let's say, at work, because you would say, well, I'm not a man, I'm a woman.
And they got into that terrible mess when a man who had a gender recognition certificate was put in a female-only prison.
Yeah, so more on that this morning. We're going to be bringing you that live result within the next, hopefully, half an hour or so. And this is a big story, isn't it, Andrew, on the front page of the Express today? It's betrayal, backtrack on travel pledge for our heroes.
Remember, this summer, it is the 80th anniversary of Victory in Europe Day. It is an historic moment, a poignant moment. Many of the veterans who will take part in those celebrations, frankly, will be probably the last one because of their age, because they must be at least 97 or 98. The Express, to be fair to them, campaigned on this. They got a commitment from our Prime Minister, Sir Keir Starmer, that the government would pick up the bill to send some of those 200 or so, we think, veterans to Normandy for some of the commemorations. The King will be there, senior members of the Royal Family will be there, the Prime Minister will be there. And now the government is saying they won't. But we just heard yesterday they found £120 million for Sudan.
It's disgusting,
this is small beer, this is peanuts,
It is nothing compared to what they find for projects that they wish to fund around the world. These are the most, arguably, these men that we're seeing on the pictures here have done more for this country now in 2025 than anybody else. The nation would look very different if it wasn't for the sacrifice of that particular generation.
We might well be talking German.
We would be we should be rolling out the red carpet for these men whenever they ask for it. And let's face it, they don't ask for much, do they? And so the idea that we won't now find taxpayers' money to send these old blokes who've done their bit, my goodness, to go and not celebrate, but commemorate, to recognise.
And they'll be with their families, and what's it going to cost the taxpayer? A few £1,000s. And it'll be the last time they'll ever see that soil. For sure. I've been to those beaches. It is one of the most moving, poignant things you can do.
Let us know what you think this morning. gbnews.com/your say. But moving on. More than 21,000 tonnes of rubbish are lining the streets of Birmingham due to the ongoing bin strikes. We're now facing a possible summer of discontent. Not only the bin strikes, of course, but also teachers, NHS workers and civil servants are all threatening to strike over pay. Let's talk to political commentator Matthew Stadler now about this. Matthew, is this... We're living in an age where workers need to assert their rights, maybe, and that we are just going to have to put up with it and money is going to have to be found?
Good morning. That story about the veterans is a reminder of so much that is good about our country, because we are a resilient nation, and those men, and my grandfather, by the way, who won the Military Cross for bravery ahead of the D-Day landings, I'm incredibly proud of that. They helped us keep hold of our values, and we owe them so much. So there's a lot that is good about our country. I go around Britain quite a lot, interviewing people on stage, meeting people, seeing local communities. But what is also clear is that times are incredibly tough. We all know that. Many viewers will be experiencing this. Things cost a lot. Yes, it's good news that inflation is down a little bit more than expected. But we talk about the cost of living crisis from time to time. And we talk about everything else a lot of the time because there's so much to talk about. But that doesn't mean that it goes away. Every single day, millions, I'd say tens of millions of people in this country are struggling. And our economic model is creaking, which means that people are threatening to go on strike, not because they want to go on strike, but because they, like all the people in the private sector as well, many of them, are struggling to make ends meet.
But going on strike, Matthew, apart from the disruption it causes, very often means they're financially out of pocket. These bin workers, for instance, in Birmingham, look, I mean, there's the employer and the union are so far apart, but we now know it's only 41 workers are impacted. The weeks and weeks they're out of work with no pay, is it worth it for the massive inconvenience that the bin workers are bringing to Birmingham, which frankly is now a health hazard? And if we see more strikes in the NHS, I thought that was all over with the Labour government, having given bigger pay rises to junior doctors and to nurses.
So presumably, as far as the workers affected themselves are concerned, they do think it's worth it, otherwise they wouldn't be on strike. But no, the scenes in Birmingham are absolutely disgraceful. And now that it's a Labour government, a government that I voted for, the buck stops with them. And this has gone on for far too long. And in a way, I don't particularly care how this dispute gets resolved. It has to get resolved. It's our privilege, sitting here as presenters or political commentators, not to have to get involved in exactly how it gets how the dispute gets resolved. That is ultimately for the government, and it stops with them. We are, if we do face a summer of discontent, the Labour government is in trouble because they have put much stall by the fact that they have been resolving industrial disputes. They've been sorting issues out in the NHS, sorting issues out with train drivers. They've come under huge stick from elements of the right-wing media as a consequence. So if we do face this summer of discontent, that will be very damaging to the government politically. I would say to the unions, if you think you have the upper hand because you help fund the Labour Party, just consider what would happen if Reform were to get in at the next general election. Think about how your workers would be treated then, because Nigel Farage, in my view, he's a very effective campaigner, he's a very effective politician, but he is a false messiah. We've had false messiahs down the ages who promised the world to the working men and working women of countries and failed to deliver. So my message to the unions is, do not start exploiting your relationship with the Labour Party, because if you do, be careful what you end up with.
OK, thanks, Matt. Good to see you. Matthew Stadlen there. Of course, Nigel Farage would say, I am the only person that will represent the working person, whatever that definition is. Let me tell you what you've been saying at home. We've got this court case this morning, the Supreme Court. Martin has said, I know what a woman is. My mother was a woman. She brought me into this world. My wife brought my son into this world, and no gender recognition certificate can do that. So we all know really what a woman is, and I love you all.
The irony is 5 judges are presiding over this case. So we'll hear from 5 judges. I wonder how many of them will be women. Perhaps, of course, if I was a reporter in the courtroom, I'd ask a cheeky question and say to the female judge, are you a woman?
Well, Grumpy Grandad has been in touch and said if I had the money to send the VE Day veterans to Normandy, I would happily pay for them to go myself. I'm hoping there's a patriotic company or business that will get our veterans to Normandy. Someone has to step in to help them, seeing as our own government don't think our veterans are worth spending a few quid on. I am disgusted with them. Keep your messages.
I'm also disgusted with that tennis player.
Oh yeah, this is the tennis player who complained
to complain to the umpire that the other player needed a tinny deodorant because you provide one. It's called a tennis match. You get hot and sweaty if you're playing properly in a tennis match.
It was a bit unnecessary, wasn't it? Right, busy morning still to come. Tommy Robinson will find out if an appeal against his 18-month prison sentence for contempt of court has been successful. But up next,
the Supreme Court will outline the definition of what a woman is, and it will be legally binding. But first, if you want some holiday sun, here's the forecast of some of our top European destinations.
I hope it doesn't rain.
Don't worry about it.
It'll spoil our holiday.
Relax, we're totally covered.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations forecast.
If you're heading away for the Easter holidays, I'm afraid there's lots of unsettled weather across southern parts of Europe, central Mediterranean, as a result of Storm Hans, bringing in some heavy rain and some strong winds. Largely dry across Madeira and Tenerife, particularly after all the flooding recently. But as we head our way towards Sardinia, northern parts of Italy, parts of Switzerland, some heavy rain here, possibly some thunderstorms and also some strong winds. So a little drier and brighter across parts of Greece. And it looks brighter for all as we head towards Saturday, but temperatures remaining in the mid-teens to low 20s.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations forecast.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK,
we're ready to keep you up to date with what's happening every half an hour, every single day. Bulletins here on GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
GB News Breakfast, every day from 6 a.m.
I kind of think certain things have their day. I mean, if you look at anything from Friends to The Sopranos to even Shameless, that I was in for 10 years, how many people really liked the last series as much as, say, the first, second or third. Things kind of die off, and I think you should leave them where they are.
But people could say that about a lot of the housemates here. Some people have had their day and then they're all in the house because people are just desperate to sort of try and get even more fame. Bruce Devlin, what do you make of it? What do you think of this current lineup as well?
The guy from Love Island is really interesting because his brother had testicular cancer and he did a testicular cancer examination on this morning, and that kind of had the Jade Goody effect about people testing for cancer. And I just kind of think with things like Chris Hoy and stuff like that, that's a really positive aspect. I think Big Brother still has its place. And you see it's gone from ITVX to ITV1, so there still is an appetite for it. I don't think the lineup is too bad, although I don't like that Jojo Siwa. I find her quite aggravating, but I'm prepared to give her the benefit of the doubt. I'm sure she says lovely things about me.
I don't think she will after she just had that.
It's seen as a social experiment, and I think, like with anything, whether it's Love Island or SAS, what happens is people get to know the game. And I think things like this become a lot more contrived because you've seen so many of them.
Yeah.
You know exactly how it plays out.
That's a really good point, Bruce, because where's the entertainment in it when you know people are playing the system?
I was just away to say, I agree with Tina that originally it was a social experiment, but then should it not have been stopped after the first one?
The People's Channel.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop stars to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. This is GB News, the People's Channel.
Headliners on GB News 11 p.m. every night. It's got 3 top comedians going through the next day's newspapers so you don't have to read them, which is great.
That's a good point. He's lying. I mean, maybe he's not lying.
That's Headliners every night from 11 p.m. and 5 a.m. as well on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Right, any minute now, the UK Supreme Court is going to rule on how the word woman should be defined in law.
It's a landmark case and should stop all the nonsense that we've heard one way or the other. Back in 2023, of course, the Labour leader, now our Prime Minister, he was leader of the opposition at the time, was asked a pretty straightforward question. Have a listen.
Can have a penis.
Look, I'm not... I don't think we can conduct this debate with, you know...
Sorry, have I offended you in some way?
No, it's just... I just...
A woman can have a penis.
I don't think that discussing this issue in this way helps anyone in the long run.
Who is he trying to keep happy in that conversation? Well, since then, he now uses the description, a woman is an adult female. So also have a listen to the co-leader.
Yeah.
Sorry, did you want to say something?
No, I was just going to say he also was asked, can only a woman have a cervix? And he said, that's not a straightforward question. It absolutely is, Prime Minister.
Well, have a listen to the co-leader of the Green Party, Carla Denyer, on this issue.
I trust people to be an expert in their own gender. If someone has been living as a woman for 15 years...
What does that mean, living as a woman?
Well, it means what I've said.
Well, what does it mean? What does it mean to live as a woman?
I don't really know how I can answer the question again.
God help us with these politics.
Cooking and cleaning, presumably. Now, back in 2022, this is what Labour MP Annalise...
And just a balance, she was the Labour government's first equalities minister. And this is what she said in
Annalise Dodds, here you go.
2022.
Labour's definition of a woman?
Well, I have to say that there are different definitions legally around what a woman actually is. I mean,
unbelievable, isn't it?
It is. And you notice it's never a conversation about what a man is. It's always what a woman is, because we are clearly much more dispensable, possibly, arguably, even though we do the most important job in the world, which is to squeeze out other human beings. Now, let's just explain what this court case is about. This is a ruling It's a long-running legal battle that's been going on between the Scottish Government and a women's group, which is, what are they called? They are called Scotland... Hang on, sorry. For Scotland Women, I think it is. It's not particularly snappy title. Or For Women Scotland, sorry. For Women Scotland, that's it. So they have got gender-critical voices that work with them, including a father Ted writer, Graham Linehan, former SNP MP Joanna Cherry. Yeah. They are all, I believe, a lot of those people are in court today. And of course, the situation in Scotland is slightly different than it is here in England because of the gender recognition certificate.
Yeah, and what happened, the British government, for the first time since devolution, which came about in 1998, they implemented what's known as I think it was the Devolution Act, to overrule the Scottish government.
That's right.
And this is why this is now being fought out in the Supreme Court, because the Westminster government said it knew better than the Scottish government, which had basically said you can become a woman even if you're born a biological male. Let's talk to the expert on this topic. It's an expert she never wanted to become, of course, but she has unwittingly become the voice on this, a former Olympic swimmer, feminist campaigner Sharon Davis. Morning, Sharon. Now,
Good morning.
Just explain to our viewers and our listeners how significant this ruling would be today and what it would mean for women all over the country.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't say I'm an expert, but, you know, there's some amazing people that have been fighting this battle. For Women Scotland have been tremendous over this, and Sex Matters. You know, you've spoken to these guys. My area of expertise is sport. What I can tell you is that if we in law turn around and say that a £6 piece of paper changes your biological sex, then women's rights will just disappear overnight. You know, decades of fighting for equality and opportunities in sport, and, you know, for lesbians to be able to meet male-free, for rape crisis centres to be able to keep men out of those spaces, all of that will be gone. And it's a £6 piece of paper. I mean, it's ridiculous. And you don't even need to have any surgery, take any treatments, change your clothes, do anything. You just literally have to say that you feel like a woman and you're living as a woman. Well, what is living as a woman? I mean, it's a ridiculous question nowadays. You know, what we need to be doing is saying that we don't have stereotypes, and that you can be a male and be as feminine as you want to be, and you can be a female and be as masculine as you want to be, but biological sex is biological sex. Professor Robert Winston was on Question Time, and he said categorically, as a scientist, a human being cannot change their biological sex. So I just don't understand how we can be here, really, and to be honest with you.
Well, can I just say, Sharon, what of those people who've fully transitioned, a man has fully transitioned to a woman, he's had all the assignment surgery. But we're just going to go. Just stay with us, Sharon, because we're going to go to.
If you stop taking the drugs, so if you stop taking huge quantities.
I'm so sorry to interrupt you, Sharon. We want to hear this ruling. We're going to get it right now. Stay with us, because I know you're interested in this as we are. Stay with us.
Is that the terms woman and sex in the Equality Act 2010 refer to a biological woman and biological sex. But we counsel against reading this judgment as a triumph of one or more groups in our society at the expense of another. It is not. As I shall explain later in this hand-down speech, the Equality Act 2010 gives transgender people protection not only against discrimination through the protected characteristic of gender reassignment, but also against direct discrimination, indirect discrimination, and harassment in substance in their acquired gender. This is the application of the principle of discrimination by association. Those statutory protections are available to transgender people whether or not they possess a gender recognition certificate. The questions which this court addresses have arisen in this way. The Scottish Parliament has sought to increase the representation of women on the boards of public bodies by enacting the Public Boards Scotland Act 2018. I will refer to that act as the 2018 Act. The current challenges relates to the statutory guidance which the Scottish Government issued in 2022 following a successful legal legal challenge to the statutory definition of a woman in the 2018 Act and to the original statutory guidance. In the revised guidance, the Scottish Government, relying on its interpretation of the Equality Act 2010, asserts that woman, for the purposes of the 2018 Act, includes a trans woman who possesses a full gender recognition certificate, acknowledging her required sex as that of a woman. The campaigning charity For Women Scotland challenged the legality of that statutory guidance and submit that it is both wrong in law and beyond the competency of the Scottish Government. This challenge was rejected by both the Outer House and the Inner House of the Court of Session in Edinburgh. The courts held that Section 9(1) of the Gender Recognition Act 2004, which I'll now refer to as the GRA, had the effect that a person with a gender recognition certificate was entitled to be treated in law as having his or her acquired gender for all purposes. They addressed Section 9(3) of the GRA, which provides that the rule in Section 9(1) is, and I quote, subject to provision made by this Act or any other enactment or any subordinate legislation. The courts held that Section 9(3) has effect only if the terms and context of the subsequent enactment require it to be interpreted as disapplying the Section 9(1) rule. They held that the Equality Act 2010, which I'll now refer to as the EA, did not require such an interpretation except possibly in the provisions relating to pregnancy and maternity. For Women Scotland appeal to this court. Their appeal is opposed by the Scottish ministers. We have also had the benefit of submissions from 4 interveners. First, there is Sex Matters, a campaigning charity which argued cogently for a biological interpretation of the words woman and sex in the EA. Secondly, the Lesbian Project and the LGB Alliance, which are also campaigning charities, pointed out the anomalies which would adversely affect lesbians if those terms were interpreted as certificated sex rather than biological sex. Thirdly, we had submissions from the Equality and Human Rights Commission, which I'll refer to as the EHRC, a British public body which has advised the Scottish Government on the interpretation of the EA. The EHRC supported the Scottish Government's interpretation of the EA, but expressed concerns about anomalies in the operation of that Act and concluded that the EA needed to be amended by Parliament. Fourthly, Amnesty International UK provided submissions on human rights issues relevant to the appeal. We are grateful to all the interveners for their assistance. In a judgment written by Lady Rose, Lady Simler and me, with whom Lord Reid and Lord Lloyd-Jones agree, we unanimously allow the appeal. It's a long judgment, as the court analyses the GRA and the EA in considerable detail. In a hand-down address, I can only give a brief description of the reasoning. The court explains the principles which apply to statutory interpretation, including the need to give a coherent meaning to an Act of Parliament. By way of historical background, we point out that the Sex Discrimination Act of 1975, which is the relevant statutory predecessor of the EA, adopted a biological interpretation of the terms man and woman. The Sex Discrimination Gender Reassignment Regulations 1999, which I'll call the 1999 regulations, introduced a new protected characteristic of gender reassignment, which protects those who intend to undergo, are undergoing, or have undergone a process of gender reassignment. The 1999 regulations did not alter the definitions of man or woman in the Sex Discrimination Act. The judgment then addresses two central questions. The first is the meaning of the GRA. As I have said, the Scottish courts applied the rule.
So one of the 5 judges in the Supreme Court is speaking as we are talking to you. They began their ruling. It's a landmark ruling on what is the definition of a woman. Can you change your definition biologically? We're going to go back to the former Olympic swimmer Sharon Davis, who's been a feisty and often brave champion on this issue. Sharon, we could be quite a long way to go yet, because there are 5 judges and they all want their day in court, don't they? They want to hear their voice. But
and you mentioned earlier, actually, there's two women and 3 men.
Yeah, if somebody has gone for the full reassignment surgery, they would argue, I am now a woman. Why are they wrong, Sharon?
But to get a gender recognition certificate, you don't have to do that, and that is the problem. That's it in a nutshell.
And isn't it, Sharon, that you have to live as the opposite sex for a certain amount of months? But it's incredible. 2 years now, so you have to say that you've lived.
You have to say that you've lived as a woman. What is living as a woman? I mean, you know, is it the fact that you put a skirt on? Is that what makes you a woman? Or that you put your makeup on, or you grow your hair? Or what is it that makes you a woman? Living as a woman, to me, I find extraordinary. And that is, in a sentence, to me, it's very difficult to get my head around. It's 2 years of saying you live as a woman. It's over 18. It's a diagnosis of gender dysphoria. And it's £6. And that's it.
And then you walk away with your certificate. And the implications of that, then, is that, say, for instance, you want to go to a women's refuge. I'm thinking of where we would find particularly vulnerable women that may not want to be around somebody that was born a male. That would allow you to have access to that. Now, what we're seeing today in the Supreme Court is, if the idea that a gender recognition certificate is recognised to that degree in law, then those people will therefore be able to access those spaces. If today this is overturned as a concept or is ruled not to be legitimate, then those spaces become once again safe for biologically born women.
For biological females. The same with sport. You know, in the Equality Act, there's section 195, and that says that sport can be segregated by sex. Well, if we change the definition of sex, then we can no longer segregate sport by sex. So it will remove all protections that women have to safe spaces or fair sport or you know, even to just a biological reality, basically.
If I can just jump in here, Sharon. Now, Lord Hodge, who is speaking, he has said the Equalities Act's definition of a woman is based on biological sex. So, but he's one of 5, so that looks to me like, slowly but surely, you're winning the case.
I hope so. I mean, what I really want to do is to not discriminate against anybody. You know, I don't want anyone excluded from sport. I just want the biological reality of the body that you have to be, you know, it's ridiculous to turn around and say that this isn't the case. I mean, you know, as you mentioned, if someone has gone through a full medical transition, that is extremely different from somebody who literally changes nothing. But males that change nothing can still get a gender recognition certificate. So this is what it's all very muddy and crazy. We just need to come up with better definitions, much clearer situation. But I cannot, for the life of me, will ever understand how we could move the word sex to not mean the biological sex that you are, because there are only 2 human sexes. You know, every scientist will tell you that a human cannot change their biological sex, no matter what surgery they have, no matter what hormones they take. And if if you think about it logically as well, the moment you stop taking those hormones, your body will revert back to whatever it actually is. So if a male is taking estrogen and they can't get hold of estrogen, then testosterone will take over again.
What's fascinating, Sharon, for me, is that the definition of a woman and sex in the Equality Act relates to a biological woman, biological sex. Supreme Court has ruled that it is unanimously allowed an appeal from a campaign group this morning, and that's fine. This is the democracy that we live in. But this is based on the Gender Equality Act from 2010. And how fast things have changed in 15 years. Because people who want to live in it as the opposite sex for which they were born, the opposite gender, let's say, into which they were born, have always existed. throughout time. I remember growing up in Manchester, there was a shop in my high school that was called Transformation, I think it's still there, and it was a dress and shoe shop for men, and nobody really commented on it. It was just where you would go and buy a size 12 stiletto. We knew people existed, and they just lived in the way that they wanted to live. Since 2010, it feels like transgender issues have become so prominent and have taken over so many areas of life, not least sport. Can you explain how that happened in such a short period of time?
So in the last 20 years, I was just doing a bit of research earlier, we've had 8,484 certificates actually issued, but a third of those have been issued in the last 4 years.
Wow.
So it is something, and the problem is this affects women's safeguards and women's privacy and women's sports. It doesn't affect men the other way round. So I suppose that's the problem. It feels like it's an assault on the gains that women have made, whereas it's not an assault on the gains that men have made, and the men still have.
Are you listening?
OK. Well, we don't know how long it's going to take for the judges to give this ruling this morning. It's going to be a long one, I think. I think it could be a rather long one.
So, according to we've had Lord Hodge, he's saying, we're just trying to establish whether this applies to all the judges, that the Equality Act relates to a biological woman and biological sex. So it seems, now if that's unanimous, that means the campaign group for Women Scotland has won their case, and that puts pay to Nicola Sturgeon and her attempts to social engineering.
Let's have a look at this, because as is always the way with these legal cases,
they're complicated.
It's when we take these court cases live that we realise what extraordinary judiciary that we have, and there's a reason why lawyers are paid a lot of money, because you have to be incredibly clever to understand all the thousands of subclauses which exist in these legal cases. Now, we think at the moment what we're hearing is that sex will refer to biological women. And as Andrew just says, if that is the case...
It seems now it's unanimously ruled sex and women definitions in the Equality Act 2010, and the point was Scotland was saying that was an Equality Act passed by a Westminster Parliament, so that doesn't apply to us, refers to a biological woman. So that is a victory for women.
The only thing I will say is that apparently he's also said, do not see this as a triumph for one side over another.
Well, that's classic judge, isn't it?
And he stresses the law still gives trans people protection against discrimination.
And nobody wants trans people to be discriminated.
As they should have.
Sharon, if we've read this correctly,
absolutely.
Is this good news?
It's very good news. It's very good news for women to be able to have the rights that they fought very hard for. When the Equality Act was written, they used the word sex and they meant biological sex, but they didn't put the word biological in front of sex because they really didn't think they needed to do that in 2010. Right before the election, I was speaking quite a lot with Kemi Badenoch, and the Conservative government were about to clarify that Equality Act by adding that word biological, but it never got done because the election was called. So we're now back to that position, which is a very good position. And I think all the women that I work with today will be very pleased. And
there we go. We can see the scenes there celebrating in the court. Lord Hodge in the Supreme Court has just concluded the unanimous decision of this court is that the terms woman and sex in the Equality Act 2010 refer to a biological woman and biological sex. Well done, Sharon Davis.
Well done for your campaign, Sharon. It is extraordinary, isn't it, that we've had to have 5 Supreme Court judges, 5 of the cleverest lawyers in the land, to get to this point.
Yeah, it's quite heartbreaking, really, isn't it, that women have made such big strides and it's so very close, nearly got taken away from us.
OK, Sharon, great to see you. Go and open the Prosecco.
Yeah, exactly, celebrate. Now, we've got some other breaking news to bring you. We told you that the political activist Tommy Robinson was appealing against his appeal for early release from prison on the grounds he was sent to prison for 18 months on contempt of court. He has lost his appeal this morning. We have just heard he'd been putting this case to the Court of Appeal. Of course, he challenged that sentence for contempt of court on compassionate grounds. He was claiming that prison segregation is making it hard for him to regulate his emotions. Amazing. He is in solitary confinement, Tommy Robinson, for contempt of court. In other words, he offended the judge because he didn't conform with the court ruling. But Abedi, who was sent to prison for 55 years for his role in the Manchester Arena bombing, 23 people killed, was allowed to romp around his prison, got into a kitchen, created some makeshift knives and boiled some oil, which he threw over 3 prison officers and attacked them with the knives. And he was not in solitary confinement.
Well, he was specifically
Staggering.
with his allies and people who think like him. We also heard, of course, the court heard that Tommy Robinson, obviously real name Stephen Yaxley Lennon, isn't it? That he is suffering from complex PTSD. He's been diagnosed with attention deficit hyperactivity disorder as well. And this appeal makes it the second time he's lost a High Court appeal over his segregation. Here's what his lawyer, Alistair Williamson, told the Court of Appeal on Friday.
He is being kept safe by the authorities in segregation, but being kept safe is making him ill, and more ill than Mr. Justice Johnson could have foreseen on the basis of the information before him. And we invite this court to interfere with that order and to reduce the sentence imposed.
So it's a historic morning here. The Supreme Court has decided this morning that the Equality Act of 2010, referring to a biological woman, means biologically born. Biological sex is a biological woman. Seems extraordinary that should be a news headline, but it is.
But thank the Lord that at last, and perhaps it means we can now stop talking about it, and perhaps it means that trans women do not think they can compete in sports against women.
That's right. We're looking at the pictures here outside of court. These are the people who brought this case to court. Women for Scotland celebrating this morning. We will be there.
Their posters are saying, women are born. You're quite right. We're with you 100%.
We'll be there in just a minute. Don't go anywhere.
If you want your news to be straight talking...
This is a nightmare for the Conservatives again.
Down to earth.
It's not just Nottingham where this is happening, is it?
And most importantly, honest.
Hard-working, middle-class taxpayers, they'll get the book thrown at them.
Then catch me, Martin Daubney, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
GB News Breakfast, every day from 6 a.m.
Do you know that Gladiators is the TV show most likely to get you thinking about moving, about exercising?
Well, who better to talk to us about than Gladiator and Olympian Montel Douglas. Good to see you this morning, Montel.
What way does Gladiators work in getting people to move?
I think Gladiators spans all generations, which is one of the things that I love the most. You know, we have everyone from 2-year-olds doing our moves and flipping like superhuman, all the way up to, 90s, 100, people saying that they're really inspired to start moving, to start thinking differently about their health in a range of different things, but also just to think that, why can't I do it? And everyone's got a story, everyone's journey, their strength journey is very, very different. Mine's been very different, like I said, from summer to winter into Gladiators. Even that was a massive shift. So I think it's just inspiring people to think that they can do it.
Montel, what if I just hit upon that area about can't do? I'm in a position where I can't do a lot of things now. I regard watching Country File on a Sunday night as huge exercise for me. What if you just believe you can't do anything?
I'm really sad that you said that, Eamon. You can do whatever the thing is as well, if you think you can or you think you can't, you're usually right. And I always say try. I think many of us, the first time I climbed up of a wall doing Gladiators, I'm petrified of heights, and people know that. And you will never know that now because I went on there and, I got frightened, I was brave, and then kept on doing it. And I think the hardest thing is to start. And what I hope is that, we're inspiring people to start something that they never thought, because you don't know until you try. And then also, it doesn't matter what it is. As long as you just make that first move, you can get better. And then you'll feel braver when you do it.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Headliners on GB News 11 p.m. every night. It's got 3 top comedians going through the next day's newspapers so you don't have to read them, which is great.
That's a good point. He's lying. Maybe he's not lying.
That's Headliners every night from 11 p.m. and 5 a.m. as well on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop stars to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. This is GB News, the People's Channel.
Well, we're going to go straight back to the Supreme Court. We've got Adam Cherry outside, who's talking to...
Hi guys, I hope you can hear me all good. Right, so judgment's just come in. Obviously it's very loud outside the Supreme Court here. All the campaigners coming out, celebrating, chanting women's rights and human rights. I've got the judgment, it's very thick and there's lots to get through, but it's worth reflecting on how significant this moment is. So Lord Hodge, you may have heard before the break, saying the court is well aware of the strength of feeling on all sides, which lies behind this appeal. The central question on this appeal is the meaning of the terms women and sex in the Equality Act. The unanimous decision of this court is that the terms women and sex in the Equality Act 2010 refer to biological women and biological sex. This has been going on since 2018, a massive moment, a huge loss for the Scottish Government, of course, and hugely significant going forward for the legal understanding of sex as it pertains to law. And of course, you can hear that strength of feeling right now behind me.
Indeed we can, Adam. Thank you very much. Let's bring our panel in. Maybe we stay with these live pictures there of the court because...
it's historic.
Mike, it's massive celebration, understandably, why they are so happy. It should never have come to this.
No, it shouldn't. I mean...
Because there will be trans people very upset at home today. We should never have... But that's my point. There should never have been this division. Why did it happen?
No.
Trans activists have been so angry and aggressive and vociferous in the last 15 years.
They've been militant.
Yeah.
You know, they've been militant, and there's no need for militancy.
That's right.
What they should have done is they should have asked the nation to open up its hearts and see what their problem was. You know, that they needed understanding. But instead of gently asking for the understanding of the torment within their body, they...
Staying out of women's sport.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. No. They just demanded, you will accept that we are women.
But, Mike, I would argue it's a tiny, noisy minority.
I totally agree, but it always is, isn't it?
Yeah.
And a lot of it championed by the organisation called Stonewall,
of course,
which used to campaign in the years
Stonewall started off.
Stonewall
started off as an organisation to try and protect the rights of homosexual people in this country. Everybody supported them because they realised there was nobody who was fighting that cause. And over the years, they've just become a shocking, militant, infiltratory, my view, infiltratory organisation who tried to get into the workplace, tried to get into schools, tried to get into universities.
Like, to be cynical, they won that battle and they looked for another battle to fight.
Well, you're absolutely right.
What they should have done was said, we've won, we're going away. Look, as far as I'm concerned, when you actually saw that North African boxer in the Olympics, I thought that is it.
Remind people what happened.
Well, what happened was this man who identified as a woman fought a woman in the Olympic boxing and absolutely massacred her.
But no, so frightened her, she stopped fighting. He so frightened her, she thought she could die, so she stopped fighting.
Can I just say something? If you take people like April Ashley and Jan Morris, who were both born men, who actually had surgically became women, are we talking about a third category here? Because you cannot possibly say that April Ashley or Jan Morris were men or women. But I mean, I think they lived their life as women. Well, parking that aside for a second, just getting back to what Bev said a couple of months ago. Do you remember about adult biological female?
Yes.
So, what is there a third category? Because what we cannot have is self-identification. We cannot have people, rapists, murderers. People. I'd say I want to go into a women's prison. I want to go into Bronzefield Women's Prison because I identify. And the situation in Scotland, where the SNP made absolute mugs of themselves,
which has led to today.
Precisely so.
This is what's led to today.
Of course it does. I mean, there was a case only last week of a group of women in a retail shop who were asked to change in the same changing room as a man with a beard who was passing himself off as a woman, and they could see this man getting sexually aroused when they took their clothes off.
Well, it's the Darlington nurses. Don't forget those nurses in the northeast.
Well, exactly. But what I'm saying is, where was the common sense in this argument?
Fear. Do you know what it was, Mike? Fear of offence, fear of upsetting people, and that has infiltrated corporations.
Yes, of course it has.
Organisations. I've said before about the example that I was due to talk on International Women's Day at a legal firm. It was years ago now. It was
but they cancelled you.
About 10 years ago. And they cancelled me. Why? Because I had retweeted or liked a piece in the Mail Online newspaper that had been written by Graham Linehan, the writer of Father Ted, who is there today in court, and he was arguing then, it was about 10 years ago, as I say, he was arguing that women should be able to use the toilet and use changing rooms without a threat of a man being there. And I got cancelled because there was a trans person, lawyer, working in that firm. But the firm were a bit mealy-mouthed about why. They weren't being really clear with me. I couldn't really understand why. And they were frightened because that one trans person in that legal office had caused such a fuss and would have accused them of all sorts of things under their employment rights that I was then
you were thrown under the bus.
And that's what happens, unfortunately. That is what has happened. Well, you know...
But just look what happened to Catherine Stock.
Catherine
Stock at University of Brighton. There was absolutely a mob. There was a witch hunt of people screaming at her and saying, you know, she was actually, you know, basically the devil incarnate.
She is owed a major apology by that university.
Absolutely so. Well, don't forget, that university has been fined a huge amount of money.
I think some of the universities
which we will pay for.
At the very highest level must revisit themselves altogether. Because quite apart from everything else, it's completely anti-democratic, isn't it?
Let's go to Scotland, which is where it all started, and I hope we're going to get a statement from Nicola Sturgeon, the former First Minister,
dream on, baby,
apologising for what's gone on. But we're going to talk to our Scotland reporter, Tony Maguire, who's got some important guests. Tony, morning.
Hey, good morning. You know, this is such a huge day for women across Scotland and indeed people right across the UK. Now, I'm joined by Ash Regan, ALBA leader of the Scottish Parliament. ALBA, Ash, this is a huge day for you. You've been in this fight for a long time.
Yeah. We're absolutely delighted. So 4 Women in Scotland have won their court case today at the Supreme Court to find a final definition on what is a woman. So the biological definition of woman is what has been upheld by the court, which is obviously a victory for women right across Scotland, but it's also a victory for common sense. Now, it should never have come to this. It should never have taken 3 ordinary Scottish mums to fight the Scottish Government all the way to the Supreme Court to get an answer on this. And unfortunately, the Scottish Government has been very much exposed now. They've been humiliated in court, and they must now roll back this ideology right in Scotland.
Now, you were listening right there to the very end. There was talk of sport, there was talk of women's spaces, there was talk of support groups, and of course the law. What is some of the nitty-gritty that you think are some of the biggest wins for this group to do?
Well, this has been affecting women, not just in Scotland, obviously across the world we're having similar issues, but in the UK it was affecting women in terms of the issues you've described. So in terms of participation in sport, where inclusion, that means that people who are not women were being included in the female category, which obviously isn't fair for women. We've got examples of women being asked to get changed, you know, to be in a position where, you know, they're obviously vulnerable when men are allowed in the changing rooms. We've had problems maintaining single-sex spaces. We have violent male offenders in the women's prison estate. This has to stop now. We have to draw a line under this now, and we have to move on. And the Scottish Government must take this very seriously. There can be no more prevarication. They must roll this back through the public sector. And we now all know that a woman is an adult human female, and it has a biological definition.
Now, there's a party going on next door. I don't know if you can tell. I don't want to keep you any longer, but very, very quickly, how is the Scottish Government feeling right now?
I have no idea how they might be feeling. To be honest, I haven't got a lot of sympathy for them. They were warned repeatedly by myself and by many other women that this did interfere with the Equality Act, that it created a hierarchy of rights, and it was the wrong thing to do. They didn't listen. They've persisted and persisted and persisted. In fact, I told very senior members of the government at the end of last year that they should drop this court case, and they didn't do it. So they only have themselves to blame for this now, but I hope they take this seriously. They recognise they've been roundly beaten, that their magical thinking that is dangerous for women is now finished, and they need to roll back this ideology.
Ash Regan, thank you so much for taking some time. I don't want to keep you any longer. I know not to keep a Scottish person from a good party. That was Ash Regan here at the watch party for Women Scotland in Edinburgh. This is obviously a huge day for women right across the country who have been in this fight for a very long time.
Thank you, Tony. Let's go back to the Supreme Court. It looks like a representative of 4 Women Scotland there. Let's see if we can listen in.
It's been a really, really long road. We first took the Scottish Government to court over the Gender Representation on Public Boards Act in 2020, and I have to pay a huge tribute to my co-directors, Marion here, but especially Trina, who's up in Edinburgh, because she was the one who insisted that this was our way to clarify the law, and she kept pushing us and we kept fighting. And who would have thought that, you know, 7 years ago, Marion set up 4 in Scotland with Trina and Magdalene, who we wish could have been here to see this today. She would have been so delighted. And we were in a really difficult place in Scotland then. We thought we were going to see rights for women rolled back, and today the judges have said what we always believed to be the case, that women are protected by their biological sex, that sex is real, and that women can now feel safe that services and spaces designated for women are for women, and we are enormously grateful to the Supreme Court for this ruling.
We'd also like to thank our legal team.
Yeah, of course.
Cindy Mules from Balfour and Manson, and our Casey, who's not with us today. But predominantly, we would actually like to thank the women across the whole of the UK and the wider world that has been with us from day one.
Yes.
Who believed in us, who contributed £5 per month, who bought our badges, who donated when they didn't have any money to donate. And times are actually tough at the moment, but they actually understood how important our case was and how the protections for women's rights, which we thought we had maybe protected years ago. It just shows you that we have to be ever vigilant on any policies or any legal things that come through to ensure there is no detriment to women's rights. So thank you all for attending here, and thank you all for the women and men that have supported us today.
Can I ask you, what would you say to politicians now? Is there anything they need to do in response to this judgment? What is the implication? What are the implications for politics?
Well, in Scotland specifically, I think what our politicians need to get their heads around is this is the law, and they need to stop pushing faulty guidance into schools and hospitals. And you know, there is going to be an ongoing fight, because we still have policies that now we know, we always knew that they were unlawful because they allowed self-ID, and we from our previous rulings we knew self-ID was not lawful. But now we have a really concrete basis on which to go forward, and so we are going to be working on making sure they get those policies out of these places, and hopefully they will start taking our advice a bit more.
What about Westminster?
So those are the two representatives of For Women Scotland who are celebrating today. Now, what does this mean?
It's quite an atmosphere there, isn't it?
This basically means these pictures from outside the Supreme Court. If you're listening on the radio, it's a beautiful sunny day down there. There is a crowd of women, although, as Trina Budge, I think it was you just said then, please also recognise that men have played a role in this. This now claims, this conclusion today, men who claim to be women do not count as women in single-sex spaces or at work, even if they have one of these controversial gender recognition certificates. So, where services and spaces are provided for women only, men will not now have a right to demand entry, even if they say that they are women and they have a piece of paper saying that they are. It's an outcome for common sense, and of course it protects women's spaces.
And as Sharon Davis said, that piece of paper, £6, that's all it costs them.
Well, hang on a second. I think this needs to be investigated, because at the moment we're actually making the gender recognition certificate something as important as a passport. I think we need to wait. How do you get them? What's the process?
Well, it shows that the Scottish Government were wrong. Let's go back to the crowd and hear what they're saying. Here they are.
To recognise that different people need different things. Here.
So they're singing cheers, a great atmosphere, singing Old Lang Syne. Obviously, Scottish
champagne
song.
out there,
Champagne. But you get your gender.
You should be singing "I Am Woman."
You have to be over 18, and you have to prove you've lived as a woman for 2 years. what is living as a woman?
Exactly. How do
you
that?
define that?
Oh, I put a dress on.
Yeah.
Well, don't
there's a number of
what if you wore a trouser suit?
There's a number of heterosexual men who like cross-dressing.
Yeah. I mean, but how do you define living as a woman?
Well, that is the next test for the court, isn't it?
Well, they've said, but you can have your gender recognition certificate. It's sort, but it doesn't apply in British law and Scottish law.
So that puts it on the back burner.
And even though Scotland is a devolved power, the Westminster Parliament overruled the Scottish Parliament.
It's United Kingdom legislation.
Exactly. So now the Human Rights Act that came in 2010, Gordon Brown's government, now applies to Scotland on this issue.
Exactly. We mentioned Sharon Davis in the show. We also mentioned the boxer, female boxer. Has this saved women's sport?
I think it
has saved women's sport because eventually women would stop competing if they were competing against men.
And two things here. Sharon Davis said on this programme only last week, every time a man competes in a women's sport and wins, that's taking prize money away from women.
Of course it is.
But of course in America it's a lot simpler. Donald Trump just said, executive order, man and women, that's it. No women will be competing in men's sport. No men will be competing in women's sport.
Well, don't forget, it's very easy to say that, but what he didn't say is the definition, which we've now got in the United Kingdom. I think we're actually ahead of the game.
What happened to this country that we had to go to court to do this?
Exactly.
Well, what went wrong with this country?
I think Andrew, you know the answer
of the biological process from the very start.
Political correctness was the initial seed that was sown back in the, I would even go as far as, that was really in the 80s. Late 80s, we started talking, particularly in academia, about political correctness and the fact that language has to evolve to reflect our changing reality. As I said before, there are some words that we would have used in relation to perhaps race or sexuality that are just not acceptable to use anymore in 2025. But that somehow went on steroids.
It did.
Partly because, do you know why? There is money to be made out of trans people.
But
it is the biggest area of pharmaceutical growth in America because you're a
I totally agree.
model.
But there's also an ideological bent to this. I mean, some people in our profession, right, some commentators brutally bullied anybody who didn't agree with their view on transgenderism. And people have lost jobs. People have lost jobs in many professions for refusing to bend the knee to an accepted view on transgenderism.
I think you'd be thinking of The Guardian, maybe, where one or two women left the paper
because they were bullied.
But Bev's point is a very, very important point, and I think the fact that, I mean, when I was 9, 10, 11 years old, we used to use foul racist language, just as an ordinary West London schoolboy. But organically, that changed. It actually changed organically, and I think that's the huge difference. But what we've now got a situation where, as I said before, I know a number of trans women who live quiet, ordinary lives. They just get on with it. Actually just live
they
as...
never wanted this fuss.
No, that's the point. So who wanted it? We've talked about Stonewall, looking for another battle to fight. We've looked about people who go 10 miles out of their way to be offended. But above all, we're looking for people who actually want a cause because they can monetise it.
Stephen, one or two people on your side of the political divide in the Labour benches took this up as a
Barack
Andrew,
Obama.
I'll hold my hands up.
I'm sorry, but Barack Obama, that administration, were bang on board with this issue. That you can decide who you are. He had some very powerful funders of his campaign, that were involved in the transgender industry.
Because people always looked at his wife and thought she'd make a great presidential candidate. How did she ever allow her husband to get anywhere near this rubbish?
I think that's one of the reasons why she's stepping away from it. But he got a lot of sort of Hollywood, Los Angeles money.
Absolutely.
Of course. Because it became very trendy. In the same way that being supporting gays became very trendy in the 90s and in the early 2000s.
Well, I think, again, it's an important point. A lot of the sort of sympathy that the heterosexual community gave for the gay community in the 70s, it was guilt, because we felt terrible about the language we'd used. It was horrible language.
And AIDS was the gay plague, I know.
I'm sorry, what could you imagine anything more foul than that?
But, Steve, the people you're saying who just wanted to live their life quietly, if they, wanted to assume transgenderism, they're some of the worst victims because of the hullabaloo that was caused by those who demanded you'll accept transgenderism. There was an equal and opposite force which said no, we won't, and then went after people who were claiming they were transgender. So it was an unholy mess which could have been sorted with a bit of common sense, i.e. what is the biological status of this human body?
Michael, could we not underline virtually everything we ever say on this? It could have been sorted out with a bit of common sense. Let's have that as a trapline.
Well, yeah.
You could have saved a lot of money and just sorted it out. We've got everyone round with a pot of tea and
I'd
made
be
a
very
decision.
curious to see what the Prime Minister's going to say about this, because he got himself...
99.1%, was it?
Do you remember it?
Yeah, of course I do.
One of the many contortions.
It was on Nick Ferrari's LBC show.
Yeah, it was.
But don't forget Ed Davey.
He couldn't define absolutely what he thought a woman was. He just couldn't.
But then Ed Davey saying, you know, can a woman have a penis? Absolutely, of course.
But we've also seen this kind of... I mean, I'm going to go a little bit deeper here, fellas, so put your thinking caps on. This idea that the human body is no longer sacred, OK? And I think you see this in the tattoo, everyone having tattoos everywhere, normalising tattoos. The idea that the God-given body, let's talk that sort of language, is no longer sacred, and therefore we can do whatever we want to our bodies, in the idea of it being about your own individual identity. And eroding this sense of the sanctity of the human body ends up where... I don't know whether you're familiar with the work that Elon Musk is doing at the moment with transhumanism and actually the idea that we will have this amalgamation of pharmaceutical implements which will be implanted into your body. We saw it last week when we talked about the womb transplant with the woman who had a baby for the first time. This idea that we can ignore the beauty of a natural body is actually gaining pace. This has made us all stop and pause.
Well, this is a massive subject that you're opening up here. The problem I have is that I appreciate when we talked about April Ashley earlier on, we talked about Jan Morrison. They were women, but they didn't have a cervix. Yeah. They didn't, and they simply cannot have a cervix.
I don't know who these people are you're talking about.
So, if you just Google...
Jan Morris was a brilliant reporter for the Times.
For the Times, actually climbed Mount Everest.
It was there covering the scaling of Mount Everest by Edmund Hillary
and Sherpa Tenzing.
And he changed his sex.
And lived as a woman for the rest of his life.
And he was one of the first. And he very bravely wrote about it and wrote books about it. He's not with us now. He died a few years ago.
Well, so did George, who became April Ashley.
April Ashley was the most incredibly glamorous,
staggeringly beautiful.
Yeah, beautiful. And appeared on chat shows and made people start to think that these are not just weird men who want to.
Yeah, but the point is, you talked about the sanctity of the human body. In both of their cases, their body was not what we would, the chromosome level was different.
In the wrong body.
Yeah. Well,
which must be terrible.
Well, exactly so. So let us have some sympathy for those people, not the people who are screaming from the battlements.
I agree. And do we accept that if somebody is genuinely born in the wrong body and all that, then they can go to Harley Street, they can undergo surgery if it makes them feel better.
We're going to go back to the High Court because Adam Cherry is there in the thick of the action because there's a huge, a very positive atmosphere outside the Supreme Court. Adam Cherry, who have you got with you, Adam?
Yeah. Hello, guys. Yeah, it's chaos out here. There's lots of people, lots of celebration. I'm joined now by some campaigners outside the Supreme Court. This is Vicky with Turn, which brought some other campaigners along as well. Vicky, tell us how you're feeling this morning.
And up until the judgment, we were terrified, nervous, lack of sleep, really worried, and now we are jubilant. We are so relieved. It's a hugely important decision. It could have gone really badly for us. It didn't. Reality has been asserted. Women are female. We are biological females, not some man who filled in a form and got a certificate.
So tell us a little bit about why it's so important. You alluded to it there, but what are the consequences of this for everyday people?
Quite literally, the rules and the guidance from the Scottish Government was saying that if a man has a gender recognition certificate, which you can get by jumping through a few minor hoops, filling out a form, spending a £5, then they would be entitled to enter any female-only space, whether that's a toilet, a gym, a changing room, a sports team, a prison, a rape crisis shelter, you name it. Even like a silly thing like maybe a women's beauty pageant. They should still be for women. And this now has reasserted that women are female, and that it doesn't matter what a man feels like or what paperwork he does, he is not a woman.
Just describe how you're feeling listening to the judgment. Of course, Lord Hodge saying there's strength feeling on both sides. We're seeing that today, but also saying that the trans individuals still have protected characteristics under law and so on, and that's important as well. Your thoughts on his view on this and the judgment today?
Certainly, it's true that people who identify as trans still have protections under the Equality Act, along with people who believe in other ideologies. But of course, we know that doesn't change reality. And I believe that in what should be a secular society, we should be making decisions based on facts and evidence, not on feelings, not on belief systems that can't be substantiated.
Vicky, thank you very much for joining us. Really appreciate it. Guys, back to you in the studio. I'm going to be chatting to some more people this morning as they stream out from the court here. As I say, it's a very big moment.
Thank you, Adam. Adam Cherry there down at the Supreme Court in London. The other breaking news we've had this morning, we're going to be discussing it in a little while, is that Tommy Robinson has lost his appeal against contempt of court this morning as well. We're going to be bringing you details of that.
He was appealing against his 18-month sentence. He is, of course, in solitary confinement. How many other countries do you think will have to take a matter like this to a Supreme Court to get a judgment on what most people would think was just plain common sense? It's been muddied, of course, by two pieces of legislation, mainly the Equalities Act in 2010. It was the way it was drafted, Stephen. Obviously, they hadn't thought that far ahead.
Well, I hope you'll give us credit for actually having good intentions when the Equalities Act came.
We had a Gender Recognition Act in 2004.
Well, I have to, in retrospect, there's plenty of bits of legislation. We can all think of dozens of them, which, we now wake up in the middle of the night thinking, what the hell did we do?
No, I totally agree. The Human Rights Act,
now, of course, this case was brought by 4 Women Scotland.
Yeah.
We're going to go to Tony Maguire now, who is in Scotland. Tony, we just saw you talking earlier to Ash Regan, the leader of the Alba Party. She is superb and she was jubilant. Who are you with now?
Alba.
Yeah, good morning, I believe it still is. It's been such a frantic morning here in Edinburgh. I'm with Sheila, a member of 4 Women Scotland. Sheila, how are you feeling today?
Today we have a glass of champagne.
Well, that's doing this in style.
Yes.
And this has been a long fight for you?
Very long, yes. I was given this badge in 2019 and I've worn it ever since. So we all feel quite emotional today that after all this time, the Supreme Court has decided in our favour. So it's brilliant.
And there were some tears in the room today,
absolutely, yes.
And a lot of people obviously have essentially their jobs, their livelihoods hanging in the balance after today's judgment as well, and we're not going to mention any names because some of those have still to be completed, but a lot of people will be looking to today as a victory, in terms of with their employer and what comes next.
That's very difficult to say. So many institutions are going to have to rewrite their policies. At the present in Scotland, we have a case where a nurse has been suspended from her job for objecting to have a male doctor dressed as a woman in her changing space. And that goes against all the Equality Act rules. So policies are going to have to be changed so that women have their own spaces and have regained that right to have respect and dignity in their lives.
Fantastic. Well, this is, as I said, a huge day across Scotland. Lots of discussions now about what comes next. But for just now, 4 Women Scotland are celebrating here in Edinburgh, and I'm late to getting into that room.
Fantastic. Thank you, Tony. Tony Maguire up there in Scotland. We remind you this case was brought by the feminist campaign group 4 Women Scotland. If you are just joining us, a conclusive decision this morning in the Supreme Court. A woman means somebody that is born biologically a woman. You can't just put on a dress and do a bit more hoovering and consider yourself to be a woman anymore.
And then burst into a woman-only space.
Now, so we've had some interesting... I'm looking at Twitter and I'm looking at the gbnews.com/your say comments as well this morning, and somebody's now saying, well, OK, does this mean we bring back men-only spaces to have men-only clubs, men-only golf courses?
If they wish it, but this wasn't a wish.
No.
This was societal pressure to accept that somebody was not of the gender they were born.
To be defined in law.
Exactly.
Yeah. We haven't... I'm watching keenly J.K. Rowling's Twitter feed.
Yeah, I'm just looking...
Nothing yet at the moment. She's probably carefully crafting a very pithy phrase.
Mike and I were just saying, all those creeps who were in Harry Potter, with Emma Watson.
Emma Watson with her £25 million fortune.
And what's
£25 million fortune. Daniel Radcliffe, who played Harry Potter, right.
They all disowned her.
And they owe their very life and existence to J.K. Rowling. If she hadn't written a book and got them to star in the film, nobody had ever heard of them.
No.
And yet they abandoned her so publicly and so ruthlessly. I wonder if they'll be stepping forward today to say, do you know what, we've had another think about this now, and Joanna, J.K. Rowling, is may have had a point. You can't see that happening, really,
well, can you imagine Val McDermid and Nicola Sturgeon now, who've been very much on the wrong side of history and now on the wrong side of the law, and I would suggest on the wrong side of women on this whole matter. Let's hear something from them. I don't often say let's hear something from Val McDermid.
You'd hope so, wouldn't you?
But you see, this is the reason that those actors from the Harry Potter movies didn't defend J.K. Rowling, very much criticised her.
Peer pressure, wasn't it?
Right in the beginning. She only said a few minor comments. In fact, I will dig out what it was that originally triggered her position, the dislike of her position on this. And it was this fear of not going with the crowd.
Exactly.
Let's not swim against the tide. I'm going to keep my nose down. I'm going to keep my mouth shut.
The madness of
save
crowds.
my millions and my reputation.
I totally agree. Half of the left-wing thinking pattern in the world of showbiz and all that is I daren't say I'm not in favour of this policy because I might get chucked out of the industry altogether. My peers might condemn me for not doing it the way they're doing it. And a lot of it comes from the fact, you know, that they're all famous, they're all wealthy, and they all think, do you know what, I don't want people to dislike me for being famous and wealthy, so I'll get down with the kids and try and assume the popular theory that's swimming around at the moment. You don't even know whether they know what they're talking about.
There'll still be actors and actresses in that profession who'll be scared to say anything because they'll think they'll be platformed or cancelled.
And wasn't that part of the age problem in Hollywood? People wouldn't come out and speak about it one way or the other, wouldn't admit to their sexuality because they thought they might be barred within their own profession.
Absolutely.
Well, I hope we've moved on, you know, from the old Rock Hudson, Doris Day. You know, I hope we've moved on a little bit from that.
Well, you'd hope so, but it still happens, I think.
Frock Hudson, they used to call him, didn't they?
Steady. Now, moving on to join us to discuss this judgment is the gender-critical campaigner Connie Shaw, who was suspended from Leeds Student Radio due to her gender-critical views. Connie, good morning to you. I can see from the smile on your face, you're very happy, and congratulations.
Thank you, although it's not really me that should be, it's for Women's Scotland who have done this, and like Susan Smith was just saying, all the women across the country who have for many years campaigned for this legal right to be able to say that women should be able to have single-sex spaces and exclude all men, no matter how they identify, from their spaces. I mean, I don't really have much to say other than flipping get in. And yeah, I just can't stop smiling. It's just so emotional and such a momentous day for women's rights in this country, and hopefully will send shockwaves around other common law countries such as Australia, which are having real issues with women's rights there at the moment too. So hopefully this will have an effect on the whole world.
Connie, you were suspended, as we mentioned, from Leeds Student Radio. What did you say that was deemed so controversial?
Well, I wasn't actually told exactly what it was that I had said that resulted in my permanent removal from my committee position. But the Free Speech Union and I believe it was to do with my gender-critical views. And this whole case is particularly emotional for me because Susan Smith was the first gender-critical... Susan Smith, who's one of the directors for Women's Scotland, who just gave an interview after the ruling then. She was one of the first, I think the first gender-critical feminist that I ever spoke to, and realised that actually I did think this was a huge issue. And me and my 3 other presenters on Politics Hour on Leeds Student Radio, almost exactly this time last year, interviewed her on Leeds Student Radio, and that episode can still be listened to on SoundCloud, and it is the most listened to episode on the Leeds Student Radio SoundCloud, which I feel very smug about. And now we've won.
And what were you accused of being?
Turf. When I was suspended on the basis that essentially I was a health and safety risk to other members, that I hadn't acted in a selfless way, and that I brought LSR into disrepute.
And therefore the idea is that you... But I'm interested in who had made the complaint then. Is there some very vocal trans activists within your university at Leeds, within the student union, who made it their work to get you cancelled?
Well, I will never know who it was who made the complaint, because I will never be told. But I would say that it's not that there are certain trans activists within the student union, but gender ideology is so embedded within university culture that it was just bound to happen. I wasn't surprised at all when it did happen, which is why I'd already purchased my Free Speech Union membership, basically in preparation, because I knew that what I was saying, even though what I was saying wasn't being broadcast on Leeds Student Radio, it was my own personal podcast and my own Substack and social media, I knew that I could cause people some upset, and I did. So, yeah, I wasn't surprised at all. But, like, yeah, I don't know who made the complaint, and I doubt I'll ever know.
Connie, would you be keen to go back onto Leeds Student Radio?
Well, not particularly. I mean,
go on.
Come to LBC if you can.
I mean, maybe
LBC? You mean GB News? How dare you, Stephen Pound?
I mean,
No, they take people from the student radio.
Why not go back on? To have your say. Why not go back on and have your say? You've been vindicated, after all, by this ruling.
Well, not necessarily, because they didn't overturn my appeal. When I appealed the decision, it wasn't overturned. But I think, I mean, they said that if I wanted to return and run again for committee, I'd have to write an apology to the station.
Connie. Well, you know what?
Do that.
Their loss is Substack, clearly, and GB News' gain. We want you here on our panel talking such common sense, because the wheel is turning on this issue. And you have played a part in this. I know you said you aren't involved in the court case, but anybody who stuck their neck out, any one woman who swam against the tide, should be celebrating this morning. So good for you, Connie Shaw. There. Now let's go back to Adam Cherry. What's happening outside the Supreme Court, Adam?
Yeah, hello guys. I'm joined by Shelley Charlesworth, who works with Transgender Trend. Shelley, we were just chatting earlier a little bit about how you're saying, despite today's ruling, your work and your fight continues. Tell us a little bit about what you do and why that's the case.
Yeah, well, obviously we're really, really pleased with the clarity that the judges have handed down today. We work with the under-18s, with children and young people who have gender distress, and we have called for clarity about the law on this for some time. It matters because in schools children are taught that it's possible to change sex, that you can get a certificate to say you've changed sex, and I think today we now know that the law says it isn't possible. When you're talking about sex, it means biological sex, so that will be enormously helpful. But really the fight for us still goes on. We still have to make sure that children are taught the facts about sex and gender in school, and not that it's possible to be born in the wrong body, which has been a lot of the narratives of activists going into school talking to children up until now. So
you see that personally in your work, under-18s being told that they can change their gender and push these ideas on young people. How young?
Well, as young as 4. It wasn't that long ago that Stonewall was talking about children knowing their gender identity at the age of 3 or 4, which is just completely factually bunkum, to be honest. Children don't have a concept of what their sex is that's fixed at that age. But more importantly, we've looked at lots and lots of school resources that current and being used in schools now that tell children they have a gender identity, and that can be different from their sexed bodies. And we think that's a really harmful message to give to children. The idea that it might be possible to change sex, puberty blockers are safe and reversible, all these sorts of ideas are going into schools. I don't think this judgment is going to stop that, but it ought to give some parents, school teachers, governors pause for thought and maybe a bit more courage in dealing with activists in the schools.
Shelley, thank you very much for joining us. Really appreciate your time. There you are, guys. I'll be chatting to more people this morning. Back to you in the studio.
Thank you, Adam. You are watching the UK's #1 mid-morning news show here, Britain's Newsroom. A massive morning today, particularly for women. A woman is now officially, in law, somebody who is born biologically female. Women can no longer have a willy.
Are you listening, Prime Minister? Because you seem to be a bit confused.
Do you think we can row back on the nastiness now?
No nastiness here. We agree with that. Much more to discuss. We've not even got started on Tommy Robertson yet. He lost his appeal. This is Britain's Newsroom on GB News, People's Channel. Here's the weather.
Even though we'll see a cloudy start, it'll be a bright outlook for the rest of the day. Boxed Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello there, good morning. Welcome to your GB News weather update from the Met Office. Quite an unsettled day for some as we see heavy outbreaks of rain shift their way northwards. Feeling cooler here, elsewhere a little brighter, some sunshine, though we can't rule out some showers. Now it's going to be quite a wet start across Northern Ireland, southern parts of Wales where we do have a rainfall warning issued. Eventually rain will ease off through the morning across southern parts of Wales, but for Northern Ireland, parts of Scotland, Northern England, that rain is set to stick around through much of the day with some heavy outbreaks at times too. Turning a little brighter across central and southern areas, there are chances of some showers into the afternoon. The odd one could be heavy, perhaps even some hail and the odd rumble of thunder. Now to finish off the day, still plenty of rain to be had, particularly across Scotland. Still a chance of some heavier outbreaks, particularly as it moves its way through across the Scottish Highlands. It could be quite blustery too under the cloudy and wet skies. Fairly similar across Northern Ireland, quite a wet end to the day here, and similar across northwestern parts of England, and perhaps even still some rain lingering across northern parts of Wales. But elsewhere, a clearer and largely dry end to the day. Still the odd shower possible across Devon and Cornwall, but with the clear skies overnight, that means temperatures dipping away here, possibly even a rural frost across central and southern parts. But across the north, where the cloud and rain sticks around, it's going to be slightly milder here and still fairly blustery, particularly around coasts of Scotland too. So a little bit chilly across central and southern areas, but for many, temperatures widely in the mid-single figures. Now through into Thursday, it's going to be a slightly better day for some. We're still going to see some outbreaks of rain through the course of the morning, largely confined to the north. Shetland and Orkney, for example, could still see a fair amount of rain, but it'll eventually ease away as we progress through the day. Some sunny and bright spells, but once again, there is a chance of showers, particularly across Northern Ireland and parts of the south, but a little milder, highs around 17 to 18 degrees, but still feeling fairly chilly across Scotland and Northern Ireland. That's it from me. Bye-bye.
Expect a warm front, moving from the kitchen right through to the rest of the house. Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Courtesy of Marquis Leisure, you could be driving away with this brand new Elnag Baron 560 motorhome. It comfortably sleeps 4, comes with sky roof, integrated kitchen and bathroom, and is worth over £67,000. And that's not all, as we'll also give you a further £5,000 in tax-free cash to make sure that wherever this motorhome takes you, it takes you there in style. For another chance to win the lot, text WIN to 63225. One entry costs £2.50 plus one standard network rate message, or text BONUS to 63225. 5 entries cost £5 plus one standard network rate message. Go to gbnews.com/win. Entries start at £2.50. Call 0903 686 3232. Calls cost £2.50 plus your network access charge. Or post your name and number to GB13 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 4 p.m. on the 6th of June. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Exciting news. Every Friday, my Patrick Christie's Tonight Show is going to have a twist to it. We're welcoming some special guests. You. That's right, on Fridays I'm going to be doing my show in front of a live studio audience because this show is about you and what you have to say. It's going to be the same big debates, same big topics, same big opinions, but every Friday night at 9 p.m. you are invited to come on down to Patrick Christie's Tonight to be a part of the action. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Mornings don't have to be tiresome, especially if you have the right company.
Wake up to news as it happens, opinion and debate, and of course, a little bit of entertainment too.
Because when the kettle's on, we're on.
That's Breakfast on GB News, a show worth waking up for.
Every morning from 6 a.m.
Only on the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We'll spread the news, you spread the word.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop stars to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. This is GB News, the People's Channel.
Westminster, the ultimate clique. And you're fighting like rats in a sack. But here on the Camilla Tominey Show, we ask the questions the establishment media is too scared to ask. OK, let me ask you a straight question, because I know you're a straight-talking politician. Whether it's net zero, illegal immigration or law and order, nothing is off limits. You have the power then.
Yeah, as I
And
say,
now you've lost it. That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show that's fearless.
no, let me finish my question if you don't mind, because it is my show.
Sundays at 9:30, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
It's 11 o'clock on Wednesday, the 16th of April, live across the UK. This is Britain's Newsroom with Andrew Pearce and Bev Turner.
A victory for women everywhere. It truly is an historic morning. The Supreme Court has ruled that a woman in UK law means biological sex.
The unanimous decision of this court is that the terms woman and sex in the Equality Act 2010 refer to a biological woman and biological sex.
Women across the country are naturally celebrating the historic judgment.
Absolutely delighted. So 4 women in Scotland have won in their court case today at the Supreme Court to find a final definition on what is a woman.
That sex is real and that women can now feel safe that services and spaces designated for women are for women, and we are enormously grateful to the Supreme Court for this ruling.
You're still a lawyer?
I'm live outside the Supreme Court getting reaction to that landmark decision here today. Biological sex means sex in law.
And breaking news also this morning, Tommy Robinson has lost his appeal against an 18-month prison sentence for contempt of court.
And summer of discontent. NHS workers, university staff, teachers and civil servants are all threatening to go on strike over pay and conditions. Meanwhile, in Birmingham,
the bin strikes continue, of course. Now, D-Day veteran betrayal, war heroes call out the government for backtracking on their travel pledge to help the veterans get to Normandy to attend the commemorations. How can they justify that decision?
and block the banter ban. Peers will fight Angela Rayner, the Deputy Prime Minister's pub banter crackdown, calling it a threat to free speech. It's nice to see their lordships doing something good.
And finally, some good news if you're getting away for Easter. More than 1,000 miles of roadworks are going to be postponed. They're going to be lifted to allow you a smooth drive this weekend, which begs the question, why haven't they just fixed the roads? Why are the roadworks sitting there in the first place?
Quite. And extraordinary scenes on the tennis court. Not Bev, but British number 4 tennis player Harriet Dart asked the umpire to order her opponent to wear deodorant before losing humiliatingly in straight sets to a player ranked 250 places below her in the world rankings.
Well, I have to say, it's been a bit of an exciting morning. I'm a little bit self-conscious myself right now. I don't think I put enough deodorant on for 2 big court cases this morning. Apologies.
She never does.
Oh.
But that is an historic, important court case. At last, all the shilly-shallying, the liberal nonsense about what's a woman, what isn't a woman. The 5 judges, 2 of whom were women, have said unanimously, when you're born a woman, that's it. If you change your sex biologically, that doesn't change you into a woman.
And do you know what it helps? It helps parents like me.
Of course it does.
So that when we're sat around the kitchen table and my girls are talking about having someone in their school who's a they, them, believe me, there's they, thems in all these classes, I can say there's no such thing as a they, them. You are a boy, you are a girl. You can choose to live however you want to live, but don't ask me to collude in your lie. And I can now say to them, you don't also have to collude in the lie. Is it good news? gbnews.com/you'll say, I think it is. Here's Sam with your very latest news headlines. Sam Francis, here he is.
Very good morning to you. Just after 11 o'clock, let's get you up to date with that breaking news this morning that a landmark Supreme Court ruling has drawn now a clear legal line between sex and gender in the UK. 5 judges unanimously ruling that the legal definition of a woman under the Equality Act is based on biological sex. Well, it took Lord Hodge just under 17 minutes to deliver a summary. Take a listen.
The unanimous decision of this court is that the terms woman and sex in the Equality Act 2010 refer to a biological woman and biological sex.
Well, it follows a high-profile battle between the Scottish Government and campaigners from For Women's Scotland. The court rejected claims that transgender women with gender recognition certificates qualify for sex-based protections. However, judges did warn that the ruling shouldn't be seen as a win for one side over another, but campaigners today from For Women's Scotland celebrating outside court with hugs, tears and champagne. The ruling goes further, in fact, than they had even hoped, offering an unambiguous definition of sex as binary and rooted in biology. However, it doesn't wipe away protections for transgender people. The characteristic of gender reassignment does remain in place. Well, one woman said that the judgment is almost unbelievable and finally reflects what they've always argued.
Sex is real, and that women can now feel safe that services and spaces designated for women are for women, and we are enormously grateful to the Supreme Court for this ruling.
Also breaking this morning, Tommy Robinson has lost his appeal against an 18-month contempt of court sentence, with judges ruling the punishment was, they said, meticulously applied. He was jailed last year after breaching a court order by repeating false claims about a Syrian refugee he had previously libelled. The Court of Appeal dismissed arguments that the segregation in prison was making him ill. Robinson was previously ordered to pay £100,000 in damages after making the original allegations. Today's ruling is now his second legal defeat in just a month after a separate challenge over his prison conditions was thrown out. In other news, UK inflation has dropped to 2.6%, lower than expected, driven mostly by falling petrol prices. It's the second month in a row that the price rises have slowed, but the relief may be short-lived, with analysts warning inflation could spike again from July. The Bank of England expects it to hit 3.7% this year, and it's now forecast to stay above the 2% target until at least the end of 2027. Manchester arena bomb plotter Hasham Abedi has been moved to Britain's most secure prison cell after a violent attack on 3 guards at HMP Frankland. The officers were doused in cooking oil and stabbed with a homemade weapon in the high-security jail's separation unit. Abedi is now back in Belmarsh, held in the UK's only available suite cell, a fortified unit watched round the clock by 5 staff and a prison dog. He's serving at least 55 years for helping his brother kill 22 people at a concert in 2017. The government's now ordered a review as prison unions are demanding stab vests, tasers and a ban on self-cooking in jails. Serious pollution incidents by England's water companies have hit a 10-year high, with campaigners warning the system is failing. New data reveals nearly 2,500 spills last year. That is more than double the target, risking harm to wildlife and public health. Surfers Against Sewage say rivers and coastlines are being blighted by repeated failures, and water firms plan to invest £12 billion to cut spills. Most of them come with rising bills. But an urgent review of how the industry is regulated is now underway, with public submissions closing next week. And your Easter getaway just got smoother. Over 1,000 miles of roadworks are being lifted across England from Thursday morning. National Highways says that 97.5% of major routes will become free to help cone-free to help millions hit the road with fewer delays. 19.1 million drivers are expected on Good Friday alone, with busy travel continuing right through Easter Monday. But the RAC is warning of a hat-trick of hold-ups as families rush to make the most of the long weekend. Drivers are being urged to plan ahead, check their tyres and fuel up before setting off. That's it from me for now. You're up to date with the news just after 11 o'clock. Let's get straight back now to Andrew and Bev.
A morning of breaking news here. In the past few hours, the Supreme Court has unanimously ruled that the use of the terms woman and sex in UK law and under the Equality Act of 2010 refers to biologically born sex. So you can no longer just put a nice frilly blouse and a skirt over, have a penis and call yourself a woman.
It's clear, it's unambiguous, it's binary. Man, woman.
So
male, female.
Leader of the Conservatives, Kemi Badenoch, has responded online this morning. She has said this on Twitter, saying trans women are women was never true, in fact, and now it isn't true in law either. A victory for all of the women who faced personal abuse or lost their jobs for stating the obvious. Women are women and men are men. You cannot change your biological sex. She goes on to say the era of Keir Starmer telling us that some women have penises has come to an end. Hallelujah. Was she that unequivocal before this?
She was pretty
court
tough
case?
on it. She was tough on it, and she was accused in the Commons of hating women and hating trans people. So she has been more outspoken, I would say, than a lot of other Tories.
Well, she's vindicated this morning,
She
so are a lot
certainly
of other people. Let's go now to Adam Cherry, who's
he's at the Supreme Court.
I think he's with somebody else who feels very vindicated this morning. Adam.
Yeah, hello guys. I'm joined by Kate Harris, who's the co-founder of the LGB Alliance. Kate, thanks for joining us. What does this ruling mean for women and girls today?
It's huge. It actually confirms once and for all what the Equality Act means. For about a decade now, there's been huge confusion about what is gender and what is sex. And we founded LGBT Alliance, Bev Jackson and I, in 2019, specifically because we were concerned about the fact that sex and gender were being conflated. And the result of that was that men who identified as women could say they were lesbians and have indeed invaded lesbian spaces. If anybody has the time and the will and looks at a lesbian dating site today, anywhere in the world, you'll find about 50% of the people on it are in fact biological men who want to have sex with women. So this is huge for all women, but for lesbians in particular, it's so nice to be heard. The judges couldn't have made a clearer judgment. I haven't read all 265 pages yet, but what comes out loud and clear is that the meaning of woman in the Equality Act is biological woman, which the vast majority of the people in the population won't be remotely surprised about that. But it's a great day for us.
Do you think the strength of feeling, I mean, we heard Lord Hodge in that ruling say that there's strength of feeling on both sides. Just as we were standing here, we saw a trans rights campaigner come by here and aggressive and was quite upset by this. Do you think now we're going to tone down the temperature, or is this going to make things, is the story going to continue?
We have a vacuum in leadership in this country, particularly in Parliament. Cowardice reigns. What we now need to do on the basis of this judgment is for our political leaders to be very clear, to stop muddling up sex and gender. Gender reassignment is a protected characteristic, just as sexual orientation and sex. All three need to be given the appropriate protections. But we have now got clarity. There is no excuse for our leaders, either in Parliament or in the NHS, in universities, to pretend anymore that a man can be a lesbian or a woman just by saying he is. There is no self-ID in this country. There never has been. And thanks to this judgment, it is very unlikely there ever will be.
Okay, Harris, thank you very much for joining us on GBNews. Really
Thank you,
appreciate
Adam.
it. Guys, back to you in the studio. As I said, I'm going to be chatting to more people this morning. Lots more still to come. Stay tuned.
All right, that's Adam Cherry outside the Supreme Court, where there is a pretty extraordinary atmosphere, and quite right too, because this has been a long time coming, this court case, all starting off in Scotland, where, of course, the Scottish National Party government looked at things somewhat differently, but it's now been clarified for the whole of the United Kingdom by the Supreme Court. So we're going to talk now to the Director of Campaigns at Sex Matters, who is Fiona McKean. If I pronounce it right? McEnena, and also inclusive culture expert at Sea Change Happen, Joanne Lockwood. Good morning to you both. Let's talk to you first, Joanne Lockwood. How do you react to this historic, unanimous ruling?
Well, the ruling has been made, and it's now incumbent upon myself and others to think about the implications of this ruling. I'm not going to sit here and cry about it. It has happened, it's established, and I think I listened to it live, And the judge was quite clear that there are two categories of women: a biological woman and a certificated woman. And as a certificated woman, I need to understand what that means to the rights that I have or don't have, and that of others. And I never saw my rights as conflicting with others in the same way that they thought that about me. So the devil's in the detail. It's how the EHRC, it's how the government implement this that's going to be seen, and how service providers start excluding. That's where the danger is. So it's not just about trans women, it's also about trans men. There are many trans men who will be seen as biological women that will be completely affected by this in the same way that I am. So it's early days.
The reaction within the transgender community, Joanne, I don't know whether you've had time to talk to other people, to communicate with them maybe on social media this morning. What's the feeling amongst trans people now?
I guess I speak for myself, I don't want to speak for others, but my worry is this will weaponise discrimination against people who are trans, whether male or female, trans man or trans women, and will experience further discrimination, further marginalisation, further violence, and further loss of access to living our lives freely. That's what we're worried about. That's what I'm worried about. And hopefully the government, the HRC, will provide clarity and guidance to service providers to ensure that I, as someone who's protected under the gender reassignment protected characteristic, am not going to experience a lesser quality of life as a result.
Just before we bring in Fiona, Lord Hodge in his statement did say, Joanne, that there would be protections for members of the trans community. He was quite clear about that, protections in law.
Oh, completely. And it's trying to see how people weaponise against people like myself in the future, whether I'm suddenly denied, or I'm having to produce evidence. And it's not just going to affect trans people, it's also affect biological women, biological men who don't meet the social constructs and definition of what a man or a woman is. So we'll see butch lesbians challenged about their identity in toilets and services, having to prove that, everyone's going to have to do a chromosome check now, just to prove it, as we're seeing in sport and athletics. People are now going to have their cheek swabs to prove they are biological women.
Fiona, let's bring you in from Sex Matters. I can see you shaking your head there a little bit when Joanna's talking like that. What's your assessment of this outcome?
I think it's very clear and very simple. The judges have said, as we all know, that in the Equality Act, when they talk about sex, male or female, man or woman, they mean what you're born and your biology. And the rights of everyone are protected by the Act, but you cannot protect the rights of women if some men can access our spaces, our services, our sports. And in fact, trans men were mentioned. Women who identify as men need the protection, may sometimes need the protection of maternity services, for example. Well, under this ruling, they will have that protection. There's absolutely nothing for people to worry about. All this nonsense, this hyperbole about discrimination and butch lesbians having to prove themselves. Lesbians were an intervener in this case, and they were thrilled at the result because up until now, men with gender recognition certificates that say they're women have demanded access to lesbian associations and lesbian dating sites, as you heard earlier from Kate Harris. And now the law lords, the Supreme Court has said, that's not okay. Those lesbian associations have a choice lawfully to be lesbian only, and a lesbian is a female. So this is very clear. And it's really disingenuous of Joanne to be suggesting that there's any discrimination arising from this. What we have instead is a restoration of common sense and of clear boundaries for men and women.
Joanne, how are you being disingenuous?
I don't think I am. I think people have been weaponising this whole debate against people like myself, gender recognition certificate holders, for generations, at least 10, 15 years since the GRA came out in 2004. So I think I'm worried that service providers are suddenly going to deny access so that I can have free and access to my life and services that I use on a regular basis. And we'll see. We'll see what happens.
Those are women's services. If those are women's services, then you shouldn't be using them.
They are services for people. They're services for people. And
we need
to make sure, we need to be clear that many services that are provided for women are provided to people.
Can you give me an example, Joanne? Can you give me an example of a service that you might use now that might be now closed off to you?
Breast screening.
So do you have... But men can get breast screening as well, though, because men can get breast cancer.
Yeah. But the whole language around it is very feminine coded. The invites out there, when I go for breast screening, it's a very feminine orientated place. As people are now going to say, hang on a minute, you can't come in here.
I think you should get the healthcare you need, Joanne, but you don't have to pretend to be a woman to get breast screening if you have risk of breast cancer. And in fact, it's been very harmful that female-specific medical issues, like, for example, cervical cancer, have been reframed as just applying to people with a cervix. And that's very harmful to women and girls who might have learning difficulties or for whom English is not their first language. So really, it is not discriminatory against trans people for women's things to be characterized correctly as being women's things, being female, and for our spaces and services to be framed as being bounded by that. Only women can go in.
Joanne, you look visibly upset by that, Joanne.
A classic example here of the weaponised language, pretending to be a woman. I've passed the high bar set by the UK government to achieve and be presented and awarded a gender recognition certificate. I'm not pretending to be a woman. Maybe by your definition, maybe biological. I'm not biological. I never argued that I could change my biology, but my gender identity, my sense of self, I'm not pretending this is who I am.
So
language that you've just used about pretending is weaponising this against and discriminating me.
I don't think I did say that word, but let me be clear. You have the right to protection under gender reassignment in the Equality Act. I have the right as a woman under the Equality Act. Those are two separate groups. The judges were very clear about that. And if you know, as you say, that you're not biologically female, then you also know that people like you don't belong in women's sport or women's changing rooms that are specified as being for females only, because that makes women uncomfortable. So we all need to have the services that we deserve and that we expect. When I go into a toilet or changing room that's labelled female, I don't expect to see a man with a GRC. It makes no difference to me what the paperwork might be. And the judges were very clear about that.
Well, again, this is the language we've got to be careful of, with this weaponisation.
Well, you keep saying
weaponisation. Me a second-class
citizen
because of it.
Yeah, but Joanne, all Fiona's doing is she's saying what the court has decided today. That's not weaponising it, that's just stating a fact.
The court described me as a certified or a certificated woman. So according to that judge, I am still a woman, but a certificated one that is not covered by the Equality Act sex protection. So I don't have sex protection under the Equality Act. It doesn't mean to say I'm not a woman. According to that judge, I'm a certificated woman.
He didn't use that term, but it doesn't really matter because you're entitled to express yourself however you wish, and you shouldn't be discriminated against for that. But you're not entitled to come into women's sport or anything where it's about sex. That's what the judges have made very clear.
Let me just ask one question. We're short on time. Joanne, why is it important to you, if you know who you are, why does it matter what other people think of you?
It doesn't matter what other people think of me. It matters when people discriminate and weaponise and make me feel less than because of their views. So if people treat me with respect, with dignity, I will treat them with dignity and respect. I will go about my life in the same way I have been for over a decade. And if that changes, then I will be disadvantaged by this. And I will see how that pans out.
OK, thank you both. Fascinating.
Really.
Joanne Lockwood there from See Change Happen and Fiona McInerney from Inclusive Culture, an inclusive culture expert.
Now, we just had a political reaction. This is James Murray, who is a Treasury Minister.
What it does do is give clarity to women and service providers. And obviously, more widely, single-sex spaces are protected in the law and they will remain protected under this government.
I'm not going to be able to cope with all these MPs coming out now and saying, well, I knew this all along, but why didn't you do something about it?
What on earth has it got to do with a male Treasury Minister?
Nothing.
You want to hear from a woman?
Let's go to Adam Cherry, our reporter, who is there outside the Supreme Court. Adam.
Hello, guys. Yeah, I'm joined by Maya Forstater, who's the CEO of Sex Matters. Maya, thanks for joining us. Your team were involved in this case for a couple of years, but it went on for several years before that. How did we get to this point?
It started in 2004 when the Gender Recognition Act was passed, and then in 2010 when the Equality Act was passed, and they were never quite clear how the two related to each other. And so for the past 15 years we've had uncertainty and we've had bad guidance misinterpreting the law, and today puts a stop to that. It's really clear sex in the Equality Act means biology, and that means women's rights are protected.
Yeah, so people hearing this who might not know the specifics of this case, they hear that and go, OK, right, what does that mean going forward for women and girls? Can you just talk a little bit about that going forward?
It means that everywhere in the Equality Act where it says you're protected against sex discrimination, or you're allowed to have single-sex services, you're allowed to have single-sex charities like Girl Guides, like women's refuges, rape crisis centres, any programmes that are for girls or for men and boys, for example, like men's sheds, are allowed, and they're allowed based on sex, biological sex as we all understand it, the absolutely ordinary meaning. And it doesn't mean that trans people are not protected and not allowed to have associations of their own, but it means that where organisations are doing things to protect or to serve the needs of men or women, that they're clear that that means biology.
So you mentioned trans rights and how those rights are still protected after today. Of course, we've seen a few campaigners rush by today and they're angry about the result. We're having people on our channel say that this undermines trans rights. What do you say to those criticisms?
I think the Supreme Court was quite clear, and we were quite clear in our submissions. There's a separate protected characteristic of gender reassignment. The Equality Act protects people against age, discrimination, race, disability, and sex, and gender reassignment, and several others. They're all different, and confusing them doesn't help anyone to understand the law, and it doesn't help anyone to protect or comply with the law. So we think it's much better now, and it hasn't removed any protections from trans people. What it's removed is the confusion that people thought that the law meant that we had to pretend that a man who identifies as a woman, who may or may not have a piece of paper from the government, a gender recognition certificate, that actually makes them a woman. Everyone knew that wasn't true. People were afraid to say it. Now we can say clearly and simply, there are men, there are women, that's based on biology. People are free to call themselves what they like, wear what they like, but it doesn't change their sex.
Now, finally, what are you expecting the political reaction to this to be? I mean, we saw Keir Starmer in the past sort of equivocate on this question, what is a woman? Do you think now there is clarity in law, there will be clarity in Westminster?
I hope so. I think the government's going to be quite relieved that the Supreme Court has made such a clear and cogent ruling. I think the responsibility now does go back to the government to make sure that policies are in line with the law, and whether that's police officers searching, or whether it's the new data bill that's coming in and how the government collects data and make sure that data is accurate. All of those things will need to be clear and simple and based on sex to be in line with the law.
Maya, thank you very much for joining us on GBNews. Really appreciate it. Andrew, Bear, back to you in the studio for now. More to come. Stay tuned.
Thank you, Adam.
Well, there's some other really important breaking news this morning. Tommy Robinson, who many of you will know, has lost his appeal for early release from prison. He was banged up for 18 months for contempt of court. He is in solitary confinement, the prison authorities say, for his own safety.
Stephen Yaxley-Lennon, of course, real name. And we are joined back in the studio now by Mike Parry and Stephen Pound just to react to this. Now, the reason that Stephen Yaxley-Lennon had to give was that he couldn't regulate his emotions in solitary confinement, Stephen. He said that he's been diagnosed with ADHD and that he's got complex PTSD because of the experience. No, I think that's probably fairly accurate, don't you? With what he's been in prison before.
Well, hang on a second.
He's hate figure number one to a lot of people in this country.
OK, two things about this. Firstly, hate figure number one, yes, by all means. But I was jogging by Hayes Marina the other day. There's a big banner up there, say, Free Tommy Robinson on somebody's canal boat.
Huge
but
support.
The second thing is, this man has gone bent over backwards for his martyrdom. He could actually get 4 months taken off his sentence tomorrow if he actually took this film down off his social media thing. He actually has been sued by a schoolboy in Huddersfield who he accused of attacking children. And this schoolboy has been awarded £100,000 in compensation, which he's not paid. There's 101 things that Tommy Robinson, Stephen Yaxley-Lennon could do tomorrow to reduce his sentence, but he's not doing it. He is longing for crucifixion.
Do you think he's enjoying martyr status?
Of course he is. Because there's certain people, and it's the old Trump thing about, I could shoot somebody on East 42nd Street and they're still approved, that he's got his fans will be with him come what may. And as long as he's in the news, if he was released from prison, what would he be doing? Where would he be in the
Just to be clear, just want to make this really clear, because people at home may not quite understand the context of this. His contempt of court
on 10 occasions
was for being told you are libelling this Syrian refugee boy in this movie, this documentary that you have made. You've put it on your Twitter account. You've shown it in Leicester Square. We've told you not to play it, and you keep playing it. That is what he's in prison for, Mike.
Yeah, exactly.
10 breaches.
I mean, this is a classic case of where I feel he's such an irrelevant person. I'm fed up to the back teeth of him. He hasn't got any values which anybody could possibly admire, but he's, unfortunately, he's like an irritating boil on your bum, and you can't get rid of him.
Not an image I cherish.
No, and you can't get rid of him. But I'm fed up to the back teeth of this guy. I mean, you're absolutely right. It's all down to martyrdom, but where I completely dismissed him as a fantasist was when he tried to protest to police on one occasion when he was arrested. Oh, you're arresting me because I'm a working journalist. I mean...
Oh, he was? I was with him on that. No, I wasn't physically with him. But I thought he had a point on that. But he was there as what he would describe as an independent citizen journalist at that march.
No.
And he was doing interviews, and he would say, I have the right as any other journalist to be here.
No, I'm sorry. I cherish the role of journalism. I've been in it 50 years. And for a very unsavoury character who is seeking fame and, I don't know, fortune or notoriety, to suddenly call himself a journalist.
I'm sorry, Mike, it's 2025. He's probably got more people read his articles online than anybody working for a national newspaper anymore.
Before I praise him, I will point out, of course, in 2014, he was sent to prison for something completely different, mortgage fraud.
Yes, exactly.
14 months.
Exactly, and that's all that's glossed over, isn't it? With the attempt of his supporters to put him up there on a pedestal. But a pedestal for what? What's he represent?
I tell you what he represents.
Hatred, really, isn't it?
Yeah, but I tell you what he represents. He was a boy growing up in Luton when the demographic of his streets changed almost overnight. Now, you could say that as a working class boy with a state education, he didn't have the language to articulate what that meant about changing demographics. He used incredibly, what we might deem to be clumsy language, offensive language around that issue. Fast forward, ignorant, you might say, but I wouldn't. I would say just maybe not particularly articulate and educated. The stuff that, what's his name, he was on with Camilla on Sunday morning.
Yes.
Douglas Murray. The stuff that Douglas Murray will say in a posh accent, Tommy Robinson has been saying for 15, 20 years. Tommy Robinson is a hate figure. Someone like Douglas Murray says it, and he's actually considered to be a hero. What Tommy Robinson was saying about illegal migration, changing lack of social cohesion, changing high streets, a lot of that has become mainstream now. Maybe he was just ahead of the curve.
Yeah, but that's not the issue here, is it?
Luton were in the Premiership last season, and Fulham, we went up to Luton, and I got there nice and early, and I said to one of the cops, I said, is there a pub round here? A pub? A pub? Where have you been? There's not a single pub, because it has changed. It has now become from what was predominantly Irish and native British people working in the car works.
So there's no demand for the pub because
it's so high-density Muslim.
And it has changed totally. But I'm not entirely sure that excuses him. But funny enough, I was with Douglas Murray's father last night. He actually lives just off Northfields Avenue. He's a lovely, sweet man. And Douglas Murray's a very interesting character. But
brilliant man, and he's very articulate.
Well, I mean, he booked The War on the West. I mean, you've had him on here many times. He's a very interesting...
But all those points you made, Bev, about, Tommy Robinson couldn't really express himself properly, boy from Luton, all that. But he now thinks that he is... somebody who is expressing himself properly and eloquently, and I'm making the argument, millions of people are following me. I find him a blinking nuisance. I wish we could ignore him because, frankly, I think he's an irritant and he's given far too much time and space.
But isn't it, when I was talking about that sign that said free Tommy Robinson, it's like free Nelson Mandela. He's not Nelson Mandela.
Right, Stephen, Mike, thank you so much. Right, Sam Francis is here with your very latest news headlines. Here he is.
Very good morning to you. We're just coming up to 34 minutes past 11. The top story, if you haven't heard already, there has been a landmark Supreme Court ruling this morning drawing a clear line between sex and gender legally in the UK. 5 judges unanimously ruling that the legal definition of a woman under the Equality Act is based on biological sex. It took Lord Hodge just under 17 minutes to deliver a summary.
The unanimous decision of this court is that the terms woman and sex in the Equality Act 2010 refer to a biological woman and biological sex.
Well, it follows a high-profile battle between the Scottish Government and campaigners from For Women Scotland. The court rejected claims that transgender women with gender recognition certificates qualify for sex-based protections. But judges warned the ruling shouldn't be seen as a win for one side over the other. That didn't stop campaigners, though, from For Women Scotland watching the Supreme Court's ruling and celebrating with hugs, tears and even some champagne. Well, that ruling, in fact, goes further than they had even hoped, offering an unambiguous definition of sex as binary and rooted in biology. However, it is worth noting that it doesn't wipe away protections for transgender people. The characteristic of gender reassignment remains in place. Well, we have just had a statement, in fact, from the government regarding that Supreme Court ruling, saying that the definition of a woman under the Equality Act brings clarity and brings confidence for women and service providers, such as, they say, hospitals, refuges and sports clubs. We'll have more analysis on the outcome from that Supreme Court ruling later this hour. But let's take a listen now to what one woman said after that judgment.
Sex is real, and that women can now feel safe that services and spaces designated for women are for women, and we are enormously grateful to the Supreme Court for this ruling.
Also breaking this morning, Tommy Robinson has lost his appeal against an 18-month contempt of court sentence, with judges ruling the punishment was, they say, meticulously applied. He was jailed last year after breaching a court order by repeating claims about a Syrian refugee he had previously libelled. The Court of Appeal dismissed arguments that segregation in prison was making Mr Robinson ill. He was previously ordered to pay £100,000 in damages after making the original allegations. It's now his second legal defeat in just a month after a separate challenge over his prison conditions was thrown out. And US Vice President J.D. Vance says Britain is in a strong position for a great agreement with the White House, thanks to deep cultural ties and Trump's affection, he says, for the United Kingdom. Talks are underway with officials working very hard, they say, with Sir Keir Starmer to secure a deal. Meanwhile, the White House says it's reviewing trade proposals from more than 15 countries, with announcements expected very soon. Downing Street sources say Britain is now in the deal space, but there's still some distance to go. You're up to date just after 11:30. I'll be back with you very shortly, but first, let's take a look at the markets.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Done. My Claim Group sponsors the GB News Finance Report.
Well, as promised, here's a look at the markets for you just after 11:30. The pound will buy you $1.3291 and €1.1688. The price of gold, £2,489.97 per ounce. And the FTSE 100 is currently at 8,202 points.
Done. My Claim Group sponsors the GB News Finance Report.
Tom and Emily are here. I've been dying to know what you think, Tom. You might want to save it for your show about the court case ruling this morning.
I think it just explains the law as the law has always been. I mean, I don't think this is a massive moment at all, because we have seen over the course of the last years where streeting, for example, in wards in hospitals, said that they should be single sex, not based on gender. We saw the Conservative Party pass a statutory instrument to say that prisons should be based on sex, not gender, for violent offences.
Well, those silly little women getting so excited and popping the champagne. They should just get back in their box. Calm down, nothing's changed. Let Wes Streeting decide for you what a woman is.
But no, but we...
You know how patronising that sounds?
But Wes Streeting can say what he thinks, but that doesn't make it law.
No, it literally does.
This will give people the confidence up and down the country, whatever organisation they belong to, whatever institution, to say, no, trans women are not women. It is very important. If it had gone the other way, it would have led to more people losing their jobs for speaking out on this issue. It would have led to more men in female spaces. It would have led to, perhaps in Scotland, what this was all about, sort of triggered by, quotas on public sector boards being allowed to have transgender people in them, even if they're female quotas. I mean, it is important what's happened today. You can downplay it as much as you like, but it is important.
But this doesn't change the fact that a private business, if it wants to segregate by gender rather than sex, is allowed to. And if a private business wants to segregate by sex rather than gender, they're allowed to.
And if that's not a good trail to carry on watching their show, I don't know what is. We're going to be talking in just a minute to the peer who wants to block the ban on banter in pubs. Of course, the fabulous Lord Toby Young.
Oh, yes.
And also the latest on that historic Supreme Court ruling on women. This is Britain's Newsroom on GB News.
It's Patrick Christie's Tonight, and here we do things differently.
It's explaining the absolute madness of this, doesn't it?
It's explosive.
I mean, this is very good.
It's lively.
850. Your government sat there, Sean, and it did nothing.
It's controversial.
And the Middle East has been in turmoil since before I was born.
It's everything you need to kickstart your evening.
Everyone's had their Weetabix tonight. I love to see it.
That's Patrick Christie's Tonight, weeknights from 9 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and my show is your opportunity to cut through all the noise and dive in headfirst to some robust debates. Ideas clash.
Situation,
Because
the failure is...
You're deliberately avoiding my point. Nothing's held back.
And if you think this is the end of it, wait for more.
And we do not shy away from the difficult stuff. Sometimes I want to shake people and say, if only you understood. So join me on Jubes & Co. weeknights at 6 p.m, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Westminster, the ultimate clique. And you're fighting like rats in a sack. But here on the Camilla Tominey Show, we ask the questions the establishment media is too scared to ask. OK, let me ask you a straight question, because I know you're a straight-talking politician. Whether it's net zero, illegal immigration or law and order, nothing is off-limits.
You had the power then.
Yeah, as I
and
say,
now you've lost it.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show that's fearless.
But no, let me finish my question if you don't mind, because it is my show.
Sundays at 9:30, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good Afternoon Britain isn't just about us. The wonderful thing about this programme is it's about everyone watching. It's an interactive programme.
Well, there absolutely is something to see here, and we're going to be talking about it more. Whether it's breaking royal news, please bring us up to date, or indeed a particularly punchy speech in the House of Commons.
Very, very curious.
We bring it to you live, and then we bring you live reaction as well.
That's Good Afternoon Britain, weekdays from midday.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Headliners on GB News 11 p.m. every night. It's got 3 top comedians going through the next day's newspapers so you don't have to read them, which is great.
That's a good point. He's lying. Maybe he's not lying.
That's Headliners every night from 11 p.m. and 5 a.m. as well on GB News, Britain's news channel.
The royal family is an enduring symbol of tradition, unity and pride for Britain. At GB News, we celebrate what makes this country great. In our new Royal Newsletter series, you can join me, Cameron Walker, for Inside the Palace, an exclusive look every week that takes you beyond the gates and brings you the very latest from those at the heart of the monarchy. Never miss a royal moment again. Sign up now. Go to gbnews.com/royal newsletter and get the latest straight to your inbox.
Welcome back to Britain's Newsroom with Andrew and Bev.
Delighted we're speaking straight away to Toby Young, Lord Young, who is the director of the Free Speech Union, who is tabling an amendment to try to stop Labour banning banter in the bar. But before we get you on that, Toby, morning and welcome to the programme. Could we get your reaction to the Supreme Court ruling today? We finally know, I think you suspected what it was anyway, what is a woman?
Yes, it sounds a little bit trivial, Andrew, because, after all, most people already know what a woman is, so do we really need the Supreme Court to affirm that? But actually, I think it's legally very significant. So about half the cases, almost half the cases, the Free Speech Union has fought in the past 5 years, over 1,500 cases, have concerned women who believe in the biological reality of sex getting into trouble for refusing to share bathrooms in the workplace with biological men, for objecting to the presence of biological men in women's sports, and so on and so forth. Gender-critical women. And I think this ruling today by the Supreme Court will mean it's much less likely that women in the workplace, at universities, are penalised for objecting to having to share women's spaces with biological men. So in some sense, this is a victory for free speech. People will be able to say what they really think. They'll be able to say what they can see with their own eyes in front of them without risking losing their jobs or being put through some kind of disciplinary process. So it's a huge victory for common sense, and we really welcome it.
And quite a few people are owed major apologies. I'm thinking about J.K. Rowling, Catherine Stott, who was forced out of her job at university. These people have been subjected to terrible hatred online and in other forms for only saying now what the law says was obvious from the beginning.
That's right. I mean, there has been an ongoing argument about the meaning of the Equality Act, with trans activists claiming that if you identify as a woman or if you have a gender recognition certificate...
I don't want to interrupt with Toby, but I want to get to hear from you about what we're here for. When they said you were going to be a Lord, I was, hallelujah, we finally got someone in the House of Lords who can make a difference. Tell us why this banter bill, as it's being called, is so important, and what are you doing about it?
Yeah, thanks, Beverly. So the banter ban that Labour is trying to bring in will mean that employers have to protect their employees from harassment by third parties. Now, that sounds like a good thing. Why would you object? Why shouldn't employees be protected from harassment by customers, members of the public? But unfortunately, the definition of harassment is so broad under the Equality Act. It includes, for instance, overheard conversations, remarks, jokes. So the implications of making employers liable for third-party harassment is they'll have to protect their employees from overhearing jokes, banter, conversations, expressions of opinion which they find offensive or upsetting by virtue of their protected characteristics. What will this mean for pubs? It will mean pubs will have to put up notices on the wall saying things like, don't assume the gender of our staff. People may have to show that they've done anti-racism training or unconscious bias training before they can get served. And pubs might even have to employ banter bouncers to eavesdrop on customers' conversations to make sure they're not expressing contentious opinions that a blue-haired barmaid might find upsetting. I mean, given that pubs are already on their knees, according to the Campaign for Real Ale, something like 37 pubs are closing a week. You know, this is going to put a lot of them, I think, push a lot of them over the edge. It could be the end of the good old British pub, and it doesn't just affect pubs, it affects the entire hospitality sector, it affects sports. How will football clubs be expected to comply with this banter ban without effectively banning any chanting, any shouting within every football stadium in the country?
Toby, just
every stadium will have to become a library.
In 10 seconds, how enjoyable is it to be a Lord and actually wield some genuine influence? Do you feel you're getting somewhere?
Well, it's great to have an opportunity to amend legislation like this, which is going to have such a chilling effect on free speech, Bev.
Yeah, OK. Well, we are so pleased you are there. Thank you so much for joining us this morning.
Fight the good fight, Toby. We'll keep you up to date on that banter.
Weather forecast, top European destinations. Here you go. Sit back and enjoy.
You're looking happy.
Well, the forecast looks good.
So you've sorted the travel insurance then?
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations Forecast.
If you're heading away for the Easter holidays, I'm afraid there's lots of unsettled weather across southern parts of Europe, central Mediterranean, as a result of Storm Hans, bringing in some heavy rain and some strong winds. Largely dry across Madeira and Tenerife, particularly after all the flooding recently. But as we head our way towards Sardinia, northern parts of Italy, parts of Switzerland, some heavy rain here, possibly some thunderstorms and also some strong winds. They're a little drier and brighter across parts of Greece. And it looks brighter for all as we head towards Saturday, but temperatures remaining in the mid-teens to low 20s.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations Forecast.
Hello there, good morning. Welcome to your GB News weather update from the Met Office. Quite a wet day ahead across parts of the north where we do have some Met Office warnings in force for heavy rain, but an improving picture across the south, turning brighter here, and that's as we see this area of low pressure slowly shift its way northwards. But that does mean quite a wet day on offer across parts of Scotland and Northern Ireland, and it's across Northern Ireland where we do have a warning in force. A good chance we could see some travel disruption here and also some flooding. Eventually we'll see conditions ease away across southern parts of Wales, across the south and southeast too, turning a little brighter here, but a chance we could see some showers, particularly across the southwest into the afternoon. And where that cloud and rain sticks around across the far north, it is going to be feeling chilly here too. And it's going to be quite blustery under all this cloud and rain as well, particularly as this area of low pressure shifts its way northwards across parts of Scotland. So cloudy outbreaks of rain, this heavy at times, particularly across hilly areas, and rather blustery around coastal areas. And a fairly similar picture across Northern Ireland too, still with the warning in force until later into the evening. Quite a wet end to the day across northern parts of England, parts of Wales, but turning largely clear across parts of the south and southeast. And we remain to see this north-south split in the weather as we head through the overnight period as well. Still plenty of cloud, outbreaks of rain across Scotland, eventually easing away across Northern Ireland, northern parts of England, but largely dry and clear across central and southern parts. Turning chilly here though, and with light winds we could see some mist and fog and also some rural frost, and just a slight chance of a few more showers just starting to clip into Devon and Cornwall by the time we reach the morning. Now, Thursday for many is going to be a brighter day. Once again, some sunny spells across central and southern parts, but still a risk of showers bubbling up as we head into the afternoon. Quite a cloudy day in store across Scotland, still with some light outbreaks of rain and still a little bit breezy here at times too, but feeling warm in the sunshine, highs of around 17 to 18 degrees.
This is Britain's Newsroom, where your voice matters.
It's just astonishing. With expert analysis and honest opinion, we don't just keep you informed.
We bring you unique perspectives you won't see anywhere else.
Can't argue with any of that. When the news happens, it happens here.
On Britain's Newsroom, weekdays from 9:30 a.m.
Only on GB News.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop stars to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. This is GB News, the People's Channel.
Headliners on GB News 11 p.m. every night. It's got 3 top comedians going through the next day's newspapers so you don't have to read them, which is great.
That's a good point. He's lying. Maybe he's not lying.
That's Headliners every night from 11 p.m. and 5 a.m. as well on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Let's get straight into this. We're going to talk to the Fair Fuel UK founder Howard Cox about Tommy Robinson losing his appeal this morning against an 18-month prison sentence for contempt of court. Morning, Howard, your reaction. How surprised were you that Stephen Yaxley Lennon lost this appeal?
Morning, Bev. Morning, Andrew. I feel sick about it. I was surprised. I thought there'd be some sort of concession. Actually, the magnitude of what he's done. It's a civil offence. He's in solitary confinement. He's quite ill at the moment in time. He is guilty. We know he's guilty, but for the magnitude, when you see all of these other particular people getting away with it at the moment in time, and even you're getting prisoners allowed to use knives and cooking oil and things like that, and they're allowed to roam freely. The important thing about this at the moment is that he's got too much now. He could have been actually under house arrest with a tracker or something like that. At the moment, this is going to push him over the edge, and I predict that you might be interviewing me in a few months' time to say, that he's seriously ill.
Would you say that solitary confinement is for his own safety, though? That's one theory.
Yeah, absolutely right. Because where he is, I mean, I visited him back about 2 months on February the 4th. I visited him, and he was in reasonable fine fettle then. But when I went into the prison, I know for a fact that all I heard was Muslim chants around the place, and they're obviously protected. Yeah, and he can't even. I think most of the chefs there are Muslim chefs. So he was not eating their food, etc., for obvious reasons, and he was eating things like tin of sardines regularly on a daily basis.
I hear you, but we do have to say he did break the law, and he was told by a judge 10 times to take down an offensive, defamatory film, and he didn't do it.
You're absolutely right, but it's a question of the magnitude of the punishment he's getting, Andrew. I mean, you don't put someone into solitary and he's not coming out now to July 2026. All I'm saying is it's a magnitude. I'm not saying he's innocent, Andrew.
Yeah.
I mean, but equally, I didn't know about these child rape gang problems.
We need, Howard, I'm so sorry, my love. We need to wrap it up. Always good to see you. You'll be back tomorrow. I've got a long Easter weekend. Have a great weekend. Here's Emily and Tom.
Well, it's a big day for women, a big day for common sense. Yes, the Supreme Court has ruled that the definition of a woman is by biological sex. We'll have more on that.
And 700 migrants crossing the Channel yesterday, the highest number in 2 years, 50% above the last year's total already by this time this year. What on earth is going on our southern border?
Expect a warm front, moving from the kitchen right through to the rest of the house. Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello there, good morning. Welcome to your GB News weather update from the Met Office. Quite an unsettled day for some as we see heavy outbreaks of rain shift their way northwards. Feeling cooler here. Elsewhere a little brighter, some sunshine, though we can't rule out some showers. Now it's going to be quite a wet start across Northern Ireland, southern parts of Wales where we do have a rainfall warning issued. Eventually rain will ease off through the morning across southern parts of Wales. But for Northern Ireland, parts of Scotland, Northern England, that rain is set to stick around through much of the day with some heavy outbreaks at times too. Turning a little brighter across central and southern areas, there are chances of some showers into the afternoon. The odd one could be heavy, perhaps even some hail and the odd rumble of thunder. Now to finish off the day, still plenty of rain to be had, particularly across Scotland. Still a chance of some heavier outbreaks, particularly as it moves its way through across the Scottish Highlands. It could be quite blustery too under the cloudy and wet skies. Fairly similar across Northern Ireland, quite a wet end to the day here, and similar across northwestern parts of England, and perhaps even still some rain lingering across northern parts of Wales. But elsewhere, a clearer and largely dry end to the day. Still the odd shower possible across Devon and Cornwall, but with the clear skies overnight, that means temperatures dipping away here, possibly even a rural frost across central and southern parts. But across the north, where the cloud and rain sticks around, it's going to be slightly milder here and still fairly blustery, particularly around coasts of Scotland too. So a little bit chilly across central and southern areas, but for many, temperatures widely in the mid-single figures. Now through into Thursday, it's going to be a slightly better day for some. We're still going to see some outbreaks of rain through the course of the morning, largely confined to the north. Shetland and Orkney, for example, could still see a fair amount of rain, but it'll eventually ease away as we progress through the day. Some sunny and bright spells, but once again, there is a chance of showers, particularly across Northern Ireland and parts of the south, but a little milder, highs around 17 to 18 degrees, but still feeling fairly chilly across Scotland and Northern Ireland. That's it from me. Bye-bye.
A positive outlook through the night will power through to a bright day ahead. Boxed Home Battery Storage, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Courtesy of Marquis Leisure, you could be driving away with this brand new Elnag Baron 560 motorhome. It comfortably sleeps 4, comes with sky roof, integrated kitchen and bathroom, and is worth over £67,000. And that's not all, as we'll also give you a further £5,000 in tax-free cash to make sure that wherever this motorhome takes you, it takes you there in style. For another chance to win the lot, text WIN to 63225. One entry costs £2.50 plus one standard network rate message, or text BONUS to 63225. 5 entries cost £5 plus one standard network rate message. Go to gbnews.com/win. Entries start at £2.50. Call 0903 686 3232. Calls cost £2.50 plus your network access charge. Or post your name and number to GB13 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 4 p.m. on the 6th of June. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
The royal family is an enduring symbol of tradition, unity and pride for Britain. At GB News, we celebrate what makes this country great. In our new royal newsletter series, you can join me, Cameron Walker, for Inside the Palace, an exclusive look every week that takes you beyond the gates and brings you the very latest from those at the heart of the monarchy. Never miss a royal moment again. Sign up now. Go to gbnews.com/royal newsletter and get the latest straight to your inbox.
Exciting news. Every Friday, my Patrick Christie's Tonight Show is going to have a twist to it. We're welcoming some special guests. You. That's right, on Fridays I'm going to be doing my show in front of a live studio audience because this show is about you and what you have to say. It's going to be the same big debates, same big topics, same big opinions. But every Friday night at 9 p.m, you are invited to come on down to Patrick Christie's Tonight to be a part of the action. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
If you want your news to be straight talking...
This is the nightmare for the Conservatives again.
Down to earth.
It's not just Nottingham where this is happening, is it?
And most importantly, honest.
Hard-working, middle-class taxpayers, they'll get their book thrown at them.
Then catch me, Martin Daubney, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, we're ready to keep you up to date with what's happening every half an hour, every single day. Bulletins here on GB News, the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Headliners on GB News 11 p.m. every night. It's got 3 top comedians going through the next day's newspapers so you don't have to read them, which is great.
That's a good point. He's lying. I mean, maybe he's not lying.
That's Headliners every night from 11 p.m. and 5 a.m. as well on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain. It's 12 o'clock on Wednesday, the 16th of April. I'm Tom Harwood.
And I'm Emily Carver, and it is... And there we go, jubilation, a victory for women everywhere as the Supreme Court rules that a woman in UK law does mean biological sex.
The unanimous decision of this court is that the terms woman and sex in the Equality Act 2010 refer to a biological woman and biological sex.
Some women across the country are celebrating the judgment.
Absolutely delighted. So 4 women in Scotland have won their court case today at the Supreme Court to find a final definition on what is a woman.
That sex is real and that women can now feel safe that services and spaces designated for women are for women, and we are enormously grateful to the Supreme Court for this ruling.
Well, I've been here at the Supreme Court to hear that judgment, speaking to campaigners this morning for what they say is a landmark judgment for women and girls across the UK.
OK, and elsewhere, is Britain losing control of its borders? Well, it looks like it. GB News provisional figures show around 700 migrants arrived in UK waters yesterday. That's surpassing the previous one-day record of 656 migrants arriving on Saturday. How many more hotels do we now need?
And breaking news, Tommy Robinson loses his appeal against an 18-month prison sentence for contempt of court.
And have you seen this? Yes, the British tennis player Harriet Dart, well, she's apologised after being caught on camera telling an umpire her opponent smells really bad and should wear deodorant. But is it ever OK to tell someone they smell? And if it is, how should you do it?
And restaurant chain Toby Carvery has come under fire after chopping down a significant 400-year-old